Hello everyone, welcome to What If Belle Secretly Impregnated Aiz Waldstein movie. Before we start, please go support tenma-sama for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Belle is a male. Belle and Aiz meet on the island of Ova and have relations without anyone else knowing. A few weeks later, the Loki family discovers that Aiz is pregnant and demands to know who is responsible. Aiz reveals what she did with Belle, and with no other option, the Loki family decides to force him to marry Aiz and take responsibility. What will happen to our rabbit from now on? How did you come to have relations with Aiz? And how will he deal with his new responsibility? An accident. Prologue. Mysterious island. On a strange island in the middle of the ocean, there was a small camp where two different families were camping, the Loki family and the Hesta family. It was clear that they were different families, since in one part there were large tents where each member slept individually. On the other side there were only 3 normal camping tents, where several members of the Hesta family slept due to the lack of camping tents. It was noticeable that one was a high-ranking family and the other was just rising in rank. It was barely dawn, the sun's rays had not even appeared and the darkness was just disappearing. In the tent closest to the sunset, being very barely illuminated by the morning light, was the tent of one of the most important members of the Loki family, none other than the princess of the family, Aiz Waldstein, the sword princess, a level 6 highly respected inside and outside the family alike. Described as a beautiful girl, with long, straight golden hair and bright golden eyes that would captivate anyone, an enviable figure, soft white skin, compared to a porcelain doll for her expressionless face that she always keeps. This is how the princess of the Loki family was described, as an incomparable beauty on par with the goddesses of beauty. And that beautiful princess was now in her tent sleeping. Even asleep she seemed to maintain her beauty, as she had a calm and imperturbable face while sleeping, maintaining a figure worthy of a princess. On top of her, white sheets covered her enviable body, completely naked for some reason. That princess sleeping peacefully, unconsciously embracing a male body next to her. That's right, the princess wasn't alone. In that tent, big enough to fit 6 people without being crowded, there was a white-haired young man being hugged by the golden-haired beauty. He was a cute boy, his harmless figure and his pure and peaceful face gave him remarkable features that attracted more than one girl. His hair, as white as snow, was rare and attractive, along with a pair of bright red eyes like ruby made him stand out quite a bit from the crowd. He was unique and special. Quite popular among women even if he himself didn't know it. His body, like that of the golden-haired woman who was hugging him, was naked, being hidden only by the white sheets that also covered his companion. That was bellcranel, first member and captain of the Hesta family, a family that had accidentally found the Loki family on the island in the middle of the ocean, looking for exactly the same thing, an item that they were tasked with collecting for a mission. But that's not the important thing. Slowly, the sunlight began to appear, slowly illuminating from below the naked bodies of the white-haired man and the golden-haired woman embracing. Without stopping, the light advanced until it reached their calm and peaceful faces. The first to show signs of waking up was Aiz, the beautiful golden-haired girl slowly opened her eyes, not fazed in the least by the light on her face. Living up to her nickname as princess, the golden-haired girl appeared immune and maintained a calm and serene expression upon waking up. Lying down, she looked around in silence. She was confused to notice that she was not in her room, nor in her bed. Suddenly she had a strange feeling of cold on her body and noticed the sheets on top of her. She was naked. Aiz was confused. Before trying to remember what had happened, she realized a third thing. Or rather of a person. Aiz realized that her arms were gently embracing a head. For a second she stood still when she realized that there was someone else beside her. I turned my head only to increase my surprise at seeing a very striking and unmistakable white hair. That was Belle. It was very easy for Aiz to recognize him because no one else had that peculiar white hair apart from him. Realizing that the person she was hugging was Belle, Aiz calmed down considerably and looked at him a little calmer, but still confused about how he had gotten there. I also noticed that like her he was naked, although he was sleeping peacefully with a pure and peaceful face that left Aiz in a trance, who looked at him in silence. After a few seconds she came out of the trance and thought about why she was naked next to Belle in a place she didn't know. The first conclusion he came to was that this was a dream. It was the most logical thing at first. She woke up in a place she didn't know, completely naked and gently hugging a person who had become quite close to her in the last few days. It definitely seemed like a dream. The fact that Belle was still asleep was only more reason to believe that. Thinking that it was all a dream due to the strange situation in which he woke up, Aiz laid back down on his makeshift bed and began to gently caress Belle's head, enjoying the feel of his soft hair. Innocently she enjoyed the moment, without remembering what had happened last night or how she had gotten into this situation. For her this was nothing more than a pleasant dream made for her to enjoy. It made sense that she thought this was a dream. Belle hadn't even woken up and it didn't look like he was going to wake up anytime soon. He looked exhausted and seemed to be having the most peaceful sleep of his life right now. He wasn't going to wake up anytime soon. Aiz didn't notice that at first. She was more busy enjoying this pleasant dream and she gently hugged Belle's head against her chest, resting her head on Belle's while she ran her fingers through her hair brushing it. His cheeks reddened slightly and he closed his eyes with a small smile on his face. Aiz was happy enjoying this moment. He didn't realize that having Belle pressed against his chest prevented him from breathing. After 5 seconds without breathing, Belle reacted by instinct. Being a level 3 adventurer who had faced many things lately, he had an instinct that every adventurer developed for dangerous situations. Despite all the tiredness he had and the comfort he was in, Belle woke up immediately when the air stopped reaching his lungs and revealed beautiful red eyes, bright as ruby. Although he woke up suddenly by instinct, he did not react abruptly, on the contrary, he only opened his eyes but remained completely still and calm. He felt at peace. Belle was confused, he couldn't breathe, but that didn't matter to him, he felt warm and calm. He was cuddling with something quite soft and warm that somehow felt familiar. He didn't move, he was still processing what was happening. It was at that moment when she also realized her nakedness, being only covered by a white sheet. At first she was surprised and slightly embarrassed by it, but she quickly stopped taking it important when she realized that what she was hugging was none other than another person, a girl, also naked like the. Belle stood in shock, motionless. He didn't know who he was hugging, because the girl was hugging his head against her chest, preventing him from seeing who it was, but before blushing at the situation, a familiar voice called him and quickly made him realize who it was. Aiz. You are very soft. Belle went blank, realizing that the person he was standing naked next to was none other than the girl who had saved him from death and with whom he had fallen in love. Belle. Aiz-san. Shocked. Aiz seemed surprised to hear him awake, however she quickly downplayed it and continued hugging Belle. Aiz. Belle, looking at him. Belle hi. Blushing. Aiz. You are very soft, hugging him. Belle's face reddened further, but that was little compared to how red he became when he remembered the events of the previous night. Belle was in shock, his head hurt as he tried to remember what had happened, but he made an effort for the sake of intrigue, having faint and brief memories of what could be described as a night of togetherness. Belle could remember. Her eyes widened as she remembered everything that had happened the night before. He had had relations with Aiz. But what had happened before that? The last thing he remembered was having drunk a strange red potion. Belle separated slightly from Aiz, who was surprised and confused by that, watching as Belle held his head in shock. Belle. The last thing I remember is drinking that potion, but what happened before that? What was it? And who gave it to me? Belle tried to get up from the floor but could only sit down in pain. He was exhausted, his legs hurt and he felt a great exhaustion in his body. The blush on her face returned when she knew the reason why he was so tired. Aiz also sat on the floor and watched Belle, confused, realizing that this was not a dream, yet she remained calm, did not seem to take importance to the situation, and simply looked at Belle with concern, without knowing what was happening to her. For his part, Belle continued to remember all the events of last night. He didn't remember anything before taking that potion, but he did have vague memories of what happened next. He felt very bad, he felt excited for some reason, his pants were tight and his breathing was labored, he was sweating and felt burning all over his body. It had been night, he remembered that he had lain down on the sand breathing with difficulty and it was at that moment that Aiz found him. She carried him worriedly and took him to her sleeping tent and then he had said a few words to her and he kissed her. Belle covered his almost white face at the memory. He had kissed Aiz. She had been surprised by that but didn't push him away. Why didn't she push him away? Why didn't she do anything? Why didn't she hit him for it? Why did she let it continue? He kissed her and then he the way to raise things in tone and Belle was petrified when he realized that what had happened the night before had been caused by him, quite literally. Belle. I abuse Aiz-san. Petrified. If Belle weren't so shocked by the situation, he would have remembered that it would be literally impossible for him to subdue a level 6 and force him to do something against his will. That meant that what happened that night was something that Aiz herself allowed. The question that should be asked is why did Aiz allow it? Although he was too busy thinking of the 1001 ways Aiz could kill him for doing that kind of wrong thing to her. For her part, completely unlike Belle, Aiz was calm, looking at Belle at her side with curiosity, noticing Belle's panic and fear on his face. She was worried, it wasn't unusual to see him shy or nervous, he was like that almost all the time, but it was unusual to see him scared, he was someone very determined and brave, and seeing him scared was not something common at all. Aiz. Belle, worried. Aiz placed her hand on Belle's shoulder, exalting him slightly and causing him to turn to look at her face, allowing Aiz to perfectly see the fear in his eyes. He was scared. Aiz. Are you B? Before even finishing speaking, Belle suddenly made a doggies, surprising her by sticking his head to the ground and asking for forgiveness. Belle. I'm so sorry. Not even a second later, drawing strength from who knows where, Belle stood up, ignoring the pain and tiredness in his body, and ran away at high speed from the tent, caring little about his nakedness. He walked away from the tent and went to take refuge in the forest, scared, ashamed and regretful of his terrible act. For her part, Aiz was surprised to see the entrance of the tent where Belle had just run out of. It was a familiar scene, quite familiar. She also tried to get up, only to realize that she too was exhausted. He got up from the floor with difficulty, feeling the tiredness in his body, especially in his legs. She took the sheets and covered her body looking for her clothes, realizing that they were destroyed. The only thing she had of her clothes was her white skirt and a strange bathing bra made of palm leaves. Next to his clothes were Belle's, piled up next to his own and forgotten by the white-haired man as he ran away in embarrassment. Aiz took her clothes and began to dress, briefly remembering what had happened yesterday. After everyone went to sleep, she had left her tent upon hearing a noise nearby, noticing Belle lying on the sand holding his neck as if he were suffocating. She was worried and helped him, took off his jacket and threw it on the sand, took him to her tent and let him cool off, but in that. Belle Sanyo. Aiz opened her eyes slightly before blushing slightly. She raised her hand and brought it to her lips, touching them gently, remembering the soft feeling of Belle's lips next to hers. She continued dressing, clearly remembering last night's events. It wasn't until she put on her panties and felt a slight burning in her intimate area that another memory of a more intimate act came to her. Belle. This is wrong, Aiz, and I don't want to hurt you, breathing heavily. No, I want to, gritting teeth. Aiz. You won't hurt me, rubbing his cheek. You never would, I trust you. Belle. But. Aiz. Okay, do it, hugging him. Aiz shook her head and put aside her thoughts, finishing dressing. She took her sheathed sword and threw it next to Belle's clothes, only to see the aforementioned weapons next to her clothes. She looked at his weapons with curiosity. She had always been curious about his strange black knife. It looked very well made and of surprising quality. She was intrigued as to how Belle had been able to buy such a weapon. As far as she knew, his family had always been poor, and even now, although they had a gigantic mansion after the war game with the Apollo family, it was no secret that the goddess Hestia had spent almost all of Apollo's fortune in remodeling the mansion. She bent down and took the black dagger in her hands before looking confused at how it was a lousy weapon. Just by looking at the dagger, he was able to realize its non-existent edge. It was very hard, probably made with adamanine and reinforced with the Durandal effect just like his weapon Desperate, but it was useless if it didn't have even a bit of edge. Its weight was regular, appropriate for its size. Aiz swung the knife in her hand, wondering how Belle was able to fight with this and cut enemies so easily with a non-existent edge. Aiz stopped looking at the dagger when she heard footsteps outside her tent and suddenly heard someone coming in. She quickly turned around and said Belle's name, expecting to see the white-haired man embarrassed and apologizing to her for whatever reason, as was customary. But instead she met a tall elf with jade hair who looked at her in confusion upon hearing Belle's name. Belle? What's happening to Hestia's son? Curious. Aiz. Riveria. It's nothing, shaking his head. Riverial Joe's elf, a high elf and the vice-captain of the Loki family, an authority figure within the family and called mother by some for her peculiar way of acting, caring for all the members of the Loki family, as if she were a mother. Riveria. Curious, come on, tell me what's going on, approaching her. Aiz looked at her silently before shaking her head simply. Aiz. It's nothing, I was just hoping to see Belle, looking at his dagger. Riveria. But why him specifically? Did you have some kind of commitment together? Curious. Aiz shook her head again and turned to face her, letting Riveria notice the black dagger in her hands. Riveria. Her dagger. Curious. Aiz. I thought he would come back for this, showing her. Riveria. Why do you have it? Confused. Aiz. Slept with me, looking at her. Riveria. Ah, what? Aiz turned around and walked out of her tent calmly while putting the black dagger in her waist. For her part, Riveria remained motionless inside her tent with a blank stare, processing what Aiz had just said. The elf was in shock. Aiz didn't even pay attention to that. She was deep in her thoughts, remembering the events of last night. When she left her tent, she noticed how the sun had barely risen. It was probably 7 o'clock. As he walked, he tripped slightly over an object in the sand, and when he looked down, he noticed Belle's brown jacket, which he had taken off at night when he had just found him, sweaty and suffocating. She took the jacket and shook it, removing the sand from it. He observed the jacket in silence for a few seconds before using it. Somehow it had kept Belle's scent, and that was noticed by Aiz, who for some strange reason, perfectly recognized his smell. Once she had her jacket on, Aiz continued on her way, searching for Belle in the surrounding area. She wanted to give him back his dagger, and well, she didn't know. She wanted to be with him, and that was it. Was that wrong? Not at all. Aiz vigorously searched for Belle around the camp, somehow he seemed happy, while the others were just waking up and leaving their tents respectively. From a certain camping tent, a blonde-haired woman wearing a feathered hat showed up. By his aura he was a god, more specifically the messenger god, Hermes. Who had a big smile on his face looking at the sea in the distance. Hermes? Ah, what a nice day, smiling. Hermes left the store and walked looking for someone. Hermes. Belle, he asked me if I helped you with my help from the other day. Smiling innocently, anyway, in case you need more, I have some spare here. Hermes reached into his jacket and pulled out 3 more flasks filled with a bubbling reddish liquid. Aphrodisiac. Hermes. Well, I hope you've become a man today. Now, where is he? Looking around. As Hermes looked around for Belle, far away in another tent of the Loki family, right next to Aiz's tent, the patron goddess came out. A woman with red hair and a non-existent figure, clothes that would be provocative if they had something to provoke and terrible dark circles under her eyes, she seemed to have had nightmares, literally she had. Loki left his tent tired and with a lost and terrified look, he saw his worst nightmares the night before, for some strange reason he had dreamed that his beloved Aiz and the dwarf's son had. Loki shuddered just remembering that, the moans of pleasure that echoed in his mind. She held her head and shook it vigorously. Why had she dreamed that? Could it be because the Hestia family ruined her perfect vacation with the cute girls in her family who were planning to grope her? Maybe. Even so, everything still seemed strange to him. Why the hell did he dream that kind of things? He didn't like it at all, so it wasn't a hot dream at all. Loki felt chills and shook his head, leaving those thoughts aside. It was impossible for that to happen anyway. While Loki walked with a lost look and dark circles under his eyes somewhere else, more specifically in the forest inside the island, there was a certain white-haired man sitting with his back to a tree, hugging his knees, muttering and asking for forgiveness. Sorry Aiz-san, sorry Aiz-san, sorry Aiz-san, sorry Aiz-san, sorry Aiz-san, blank. In his mind, the white-haired man remembered more and more details of the previous night, feeling even worse when he remembered that he went directly to tell Aiz that he loved her and that he wanted to do it with her, explaining to her at that moment what he meant because Aiz didn't seem to understand at all, and explaining to her why he wanted to do it with her. Belle covered his face with his hands again as he remembered what could very well be considered the worst confession in the world. It definitely was. Now he wondered how to look into Aiz's eyes or how to speak to her after having abused her, the princess of the Loki family, the girl he loved. And? Guilty Rabbit 01. Sometimes things don't go as planned. And for the captain of the Hestia family, bellcranel, that was something completely common. Mysterious Island. On the mysterious island, where the Hestia and Loki families were located. More specifically in a certain camping tent completely alone except for a young man with white hair and red eyes, who was in the center of it hugging his legs and with his head hidden in them hiding his broken and dejected look. His thoughts were solely on the terrible act he had committed the night before, while under the influence of an aphrodisiac, that's right, abusing Aiz. Well, he didn't remember much of what had happened when things had gotten heated the night before, but all he remembered was Aiz yelling at him to stop and that it was wrong or was that him. The truth is, he wasn't sure, but it was obvious that Aiz would never agree with that, especially not with him. They didn't have any kind of relationship, and Aiz probably didn't see him that way in the slightest. That meant that he had indeed abused Aiz. She was probably tired, or because she didn't want to hurt him since they were friends, she didn't attack him and being drugged, the abuse was that. Thinking about all that only made Belle feel even worse. He was definitely not a hero, and much less would he be the hero of Aiz as he wanted. Now he was nothing more than his miserable and disgusting abuser who took advantage of his friendship so that he would not harm him. Conclusion equals he was an abusive bastard. Belle was already so depressed that he was ready to cry, but just thinking that right now Aiz could be devastated by being abused by a friend he trusted made him feel even worse and without the right to cry, and he just stayed in that position, insulting and blaming himself for everything. On the other hand, outside the camping tent a few meters away, the entire Hestia family was sitting around a campfire, worried and not knowing what to do. Half an hour ago they had all woken up and were confused to see Belle nearby. They had gone out to look for him, but to their surprise the sword princess, Aiz Waldstein, was already looking for Belle around the camp with his jacket. No one could believe it. Why was Aiz wearing Belle's jacket? Why was she looking for him? Why was she walking so strangely? These and more questions were what the Hestia family asked themselves. Leaving aside that Aiz had Belle's jacket and that they had to restrain Hestia from jumping directly on top of Aiz and reprimanding her about why she had it, they began to search for Belle in the surroundings with little success. 10 minutes later, when they had begun to worry, he appeared from the bushes out of nowhere. They had quickly gone to him to ask him where he had been, but Aiz got there first and before anyone else stood in front of Belle, worried, asking her where she had been. To everyone's surprise, Belle ignored her. No, he didn't give cheap excuses to avoid her, he literally ignored her. He didn't say a word to her, he didn't even look at her. When he heard her voice he seemed to remain motionless for a second before continuing to walk, avoiding Aiz, who the only thing she could do was ask him what was happening, until Belle arrived at his camping tent and locked himself in. Aiz tried to enter, but the store wouldn't open anymore, and finally noticing the situation, Belle's family moved Aiz away a bit, telling her that they needed some space and that Belle looked bad. Obviously the one who said that was Hestia, not wanting Aiz to get close to Belle and being worried noticing that Belle was in that state because of something related to Aiz. She didn't want things to get worse and decided to give Belle her space. If Aiz kept insisting on talking to Belle, Belle would probably get even worse. Although of course, that meant that they couldn't go into the store or talk to Belle to ask him what was wrong, and that worried them more. Hestia. What happened to Belle Kun? Worried. Lily has no idea. Belle-sama looked very dejected and didn't even speak to the sword princess. That was strange. Welf. And she was looking for him in the morning, worried, something happened between them, thoughtful. Hermes. We must help Belle-sama. He looked very depressed, sad. Makoto. There's no doubt that something serious happened between them before we woke up. Seriously, it's best not to delve into the matter for now. Let's wait a bit until Belle Dono is in better condition to talk to him, looking at everyone. Lily. We have a bigger problem, serious. The sword princess is the reason for Belle's attitude, so what will we do to prevent Belle-sama and her from meeting? Hestia. Thoughtful. Well, it will make things a little easier for us since we are leaving this island today. Hermes. But what will we do to prevent them from meeting until then? Looking at her worriedly. Well, thoughtful. Hey guys. Why are you making such long faces? What's going on? Everyone turned around upon hearing a voice near them, and quickly Hestia, Lily, and Welf narrowed their eyes with caution, seeing the god Hermes standing near them with an amused smile while behind him walked calmly a blue-haired girl with glasses. Thank you for letting me sleep with you, goddess Hestia, looking at her. Hestia. Don't worry, Asfi-chan, smiling, I would never let a woman sleep defenseless near Hermes. Asfi nodded gratefully and sat next to them around the campfire, while Hermes sighed in disappointment at the interference in his plans. Although not everything was bad. Well, thanks to that, he slept in Welf and Belle's tent, and obviously he took the opportunity to help Belle become a man, as his old friend would say. At first, I chatted with him a little about the topic. Girls. Belle was too nervous to speak, but after a while he loosened up a bit and Hermes got some valuable information. However, it was vital that Belle didn't suspect him, so he gave him an aphrodisiac and told him to leave the tent to look for some large leaves because he didn't have any blankets. He told him that the aphrodisiac was a potion that gave better vision in the dark, and Belle believed him completely. Once Belle left, Hermes just took his blankets and fell asleep. Belle wasn't going to need them anymore. He was going to sleep in a more comfortable place after a good deed. So he had the right to use them. And so his magnificent plan ended. Now he was just looking for Belle to find out what had happened. She wasn't in the camping tent, so that was a good sign, although she wasn't in Aiz's tent either, but she wasn't there either. He didn't know if that was a good or bad sign. In addition to that, the vice captain of the Loki family was sitting on an improvised chair with a lost look. It seemed as if she was deducing if she had heard something real or a misunderstanding. Hestia. What the hell do you want, Hermes? Hermes. Come on, don't be so cold, I just wanted to know where Belle is, smiling. Lily. And why do you want to know that, Hermes-sama, seriously? Hermes. I'm just curious. As soon as Herm finished saying that, they narrowed their eyes again in suspicion. Even Makoto and Harahim began to see him that way, suspecting him. Hermes. Hey, why are you looking at me like this? I haven't done anything, smiling nervously. Hestia. You stupid god. What did you have to do with Belle-kun and Wallen whatever? Pointing at him angrily. Hermes. Ah well, that sounds like things didn't go so well, nervous. Well, Hermes-sama, what happened after I fell asleep? Serious. Lily. I'd better talk, Hermes-sama, seriously. Hermes. Hey, laughing nervously, there's no need for everyone to look at me so threateningly, raising his hands. Makoto Harahim. Speak. Hermes. But don't hit me, please. Hermes. I've already asked for your forgiveness 50 times. Let me go, you're going to back me to the Tenkai. Covering himself. Hestia. You stupid bucking god. I'm going to bring you back to Tenkai myself. Furious. Lily. Hitting him furiously. Welf. Hey, don't you think you're exaggerating a bit? He's already foaming at the mouth. Makoto. Welf. Don't know he deserves it, right Harahim? Hermes remained silent, she and Mikoto were holding Hermes by the arms and legs, preventing him from escaping. Hermes. Ah. Asfi, help me. Asfi, who was sitting in front of the bonfire, stood up calmly and shook her clothes, removing some sand that was on them, and walked calmly until she was in front of Hermes. Hermes. My savior. Happy. None of those who were beating Hermes turned to look at Asfi, they didn't care about her, in fact. Hermes. Huh. Why are you letting him through? Asfi took a deep breath before starting to kick Hermes with controlled force, she didn't want to send him into the Tenkai either, at least not yet. Asfi. I'm tired of having to be the one to solve all your problems. Stop acting like a child and act like an adult for once. Giving him one last kick. Hermes Ga. Desmolandes. But Hermes fainted, it made no sense to continue hitting him if they didn't hear his cries of pain, so they left him buried in the sand, but not before Hesta lightly kicked the sand, throwing it in Hermes' face. Hesta returned to the bonfire breathing heavily with a big angry face, she took big breaths of air to calm down, and once calmer her face changed to one of concern. Hesta. We must help Belle. He must be locked away thinking he's a horrible person for what he did. Worried. Well, look on the bright side, Belle became a man. 5 minutes later. Welf was buried in the sand with bruises on his face, he didn't make the best choice of words. Welf death. Lily and Hesta sat down again after giving Welf a furious beating and sighed tiredly before talking again about the terrible situation. Mikoto. Hey, don't you think the Sword Princess has been looking for Belle Dono too well, looking at everyone? Hesta. Why you're saying he might be looking for Belle-kun for revenge? Terrified. Mikoto. Well actually there are several options, I could look for Belle Dono to get revenge for what they did, thoughtful. Hesta, Lily and Hermes were excited to think that the Loki family might look for Belle when they found out what had happened and claim his life for desecrating their princess. Loki was perfectly capable of sending several of his members after Belle's head for all this, and since Aiz was such a beautiful girl, there was no doubt that several simps would also immediately go to hunt Belle down. Mikoto. Although thinking about it a little, maybe the Sword Princess let Belle do those things, blush. Lily. Ah. Excited, what the hell are you talking about, Mikoto? Why would the Sword Princess allow that? Annoyed. Mikoto. Looking at them, she and Belle are very close, it may not seem like it, but since what happened with Hestia-sama when she was kidnapped by Ares' army and the three of them got lost in a remote village, she became closer to Belle Dono. When they returned from that, remember that she frequently appeared at the fireplace mansion to ask for Belle Dono and see if she could train with him. So it's likely that she let Belle do those things and then ask him to take responsibility, and in that case, it would be inevitable that they would be a couple. Hesta, Lily and Hermes were shocked having a revelation, and the three imagined Aiz suddenly appearing in the fireplace mansion looking for Belle and telling her that he had taken her first time and now she had to take responsibility. Hesta. Oh, we must avoid that at all costs. In shock. Lily. Hermes-sama. Turning to see Hermes. Hermes, who was just regaining consciousness and spitting some sand from his mouth, turned to look at them half stunned before becoming excited when he saw Hesta walking with an annoyed face and strong footsteps towards him, being followed by Lily and Hermes. Hermes. Hey, what's going on, huh? Stunned. Sigh. Hesta. Wake up, idiot. Slapping him, how did you follow us to this island? Shaking him. Hermes. Being shaken, I came on my family's personal boat, I left it hidden on the island for when I had to leave, dizzy. Hesta. Okay. Take us, we're leaving the island right now. Seriously. Hermes. Excuse me. Hesta. I don't excuse you. Now let's hurry, get him out. Hermes and Lily stood at Hermes' sides, who looked at them worriedly, and before he could ask, they both grabbed him by the neck and began to pull his head out of the sand to unearth his body. The poor Hermes began to turn blue, feeling some of his bones crack, and before he was returned to the Tenkai, the sand took pity on him and freed him, letting his body out, being lifted by Hermes and Lily, who carried him like a sack of potatoes while they followed directions of where the ship was. Hermes agsbij, foaming at the mouth. Hesta. Hurry. You guys go find the ship's location while we get Belle-kun out of the tent. Seriously. Lily and Hermes nodded seriously and left quickly while the dying Hermes showed them the location of where their ship was. In front of the Aiz tent. Riveria was sitting on an improvised bench in front of a bonfire, staring into space as she thought about Aiz's words. Aiz. I thought he'd come back for this, showing a black dagger. Riveria. Why do you have it? Aiz. Slept with me, looking at her. Rivera repeated that thought over and over again, trying to figure out if he had misunderstood something in Aiza's words, but no matter how hard he tried to find a misunderstanding in her words, everything indicated that they really slept together, especially the fact that Aiz had his jacket and his black knife. Of course, after a while she had managed to calm down and think a little more rationally. It was impossible that they had had relations, even with the little that she knew Belle. She knew that someone like him would never have the courage to try something with Aiz, and Aiz, although she was absent-minded and somewhat innocent, knew what was wrong and right and would never let anyone touch her without her consent. With all that in mind, it was impossible for them to have relations, and she knew that perfectly well because she knew Aiz better than anyone. It was true that lately Aiz was happier and more open thanks to Belle, and she knew perfectly well, even better than Aiz herself, that she had been starting to have feelings for Belle. Above all, I noticed a change when they returned from rescuing the goddess Hestia from her kidnappers, the Ares family, and having taken shelter in a remote village. I had asked about what had happened, but the only thing that came out of his mouth was, "Aiz. Dance with Belle," expressionless. Despite Aiz's expressionless face, Rivera was perfectly able to notice it, even though Aiz herself didn't even notice it. Rivera could see that tiny smile and that slight blush on her face when she told him that. There was no doubt that Belle was someone very important to Aiz at this moment. She could even bet that Belle was as important to Aiz as her closest friends or even more, and they had known each other for less than a year. It was simply surprising what that boy had been capable of. Rivera held him in high esteem. He believed that Belle could be the only one capable of keeping Rivera away from the vengeful and dark path he was walking on and be the light that would illuminate that dark path so that he could take a better route. He had faith in that. Even so, he was still surprised that he was bold enough to sleep next to Aiz. He highly doubted that they had had relations, considering how they both were. Neither he nor Aiz would take the initiative, he had no doubts about that. Even so, she was surprised by the audacity they had had to sleep together in the same tent. Of that she had no doubt that it had happened. After carefully examining the memory of what happened this morning, there was no doubt that they had slept together. That surprised her. She didn't know who had taken the initiative, but whoever it was a big surprise for Riveria, and well, being an elf it was also somewhat daring. Riveria. Riveria was brought out of her thoughts when a voice behind her called her name, and she quickly turned her head, seeing Aiz behind her wearing Belle's brown jacket while looking at her expressionlessly. "Aiz. What are you doing?" Curious. "Riveria. I was waiting for you." Getting up, "I wanted to ask you about this morning." Staring at her, "It's not that I want to be nosy or gossip like Tiona. I'm just curious to know how you and Belle slept together." Looking at her. "Aiz. How?" Riveria. "Yeah, could you tell me?" Smiling slightly. "Behind. Aiz are Belle. Belle-san." Aiz blushed slightly and looked expressionlessly at Riveria, who looked at her confused upon noticing Aiz's clear blush. "Aiz. That is a secret." Looking away. Now Riveria was in shock upon hearing Aiz's words. Her mind went blank and her body completely paralyzed, a direct blow to her mind. Aiz didn't even notice Riveria's condition and returned to his tent while taking out the black dagger from his brown jacket and looking at her silently. "Aiz. I didn't find it." Aiz's look changed to one of slight disappointment, but she quickly motivated herself by telling herself that she would come back to find him to give him the knife and well, whatever, she just wanted to talk to him about what happened. The memory of her gently stroking Belle's hair in the morning came to Aiz's mind, feeling a great peace while doing so. She wanted to do that again. "Yes, the next time I saw him I would give him my knife, talk to him, and give him a lap pillow to rub his hair." Aiz nodded excitedly while next to her a small version of herself smiled, giving her a thumbs up in approval. It was a magnificent plan. While Aiz was in his tent thinking about Belle and his great plan for the next time they met, somewhere else was that white-haired man who was technically kidnapped by his family. Belle. Mhhhhhhh. Exalted. Belle was screaming, but he had a handkerchief over his mouth that prevented him from screaming loudly and alerting Loki's family. Welf and Asfi were carrying him while they tied him up with a magical object that Asfi had, that way he couldn't free himself. Even so, he had to hurry before Loki's family noticed that they had literally escaped. It would be even worse if they found out what happened between Belle and Aiz because of an idiot god with a feather hat. Normally Hestia wouldn't agree with escaping, and even if it hurt her, she would have to hold Belle responsible, even if it was a certain idiot god's fault. But if the Loki family found out they would most likely have them killed, so the best option was to escape and wait a bit for the Loki family to calm down before apologizing and having Belle take responsibility. As much as it weighed on her heart as a virgin goddess, it was her responsibility to make Belle take responsibility for that act. Well, of course, if Aiz also wanted it, something that Hestia wanted her to reject. Anyway, they would have time to think about that later. For now Hestia was concentrating solely on escaping alive while they still had the chance. "Hestia. There's the ship. Quick." Hestia pointed to a large wooden ship parked on the sand, left there by Hermes ready to depart should he need a strategic retreat. Asfi quickly helped them get on the boat, being the captain of her family and the one who had to take care of the nonsense and stupid plans of her god. She had a wide variety of skills for this kind of situations, such as handling a boat. As soon as everyone was on board the class rose, although to the confusion of the Hestia family, there were no sails to propel the ship. Paraham. Huh. And the candles. Confused. Lily. That's right, Lily just noticed that this thing has nothing to propel it with, looking around. Welf. Excuse me, Asfi-san, how are we going to leave if there are no candles? Confused. Asfi. Candles. Raising an eyebrow, my beauty doesn't need those rustic things. Pulling a lever. Asfi took the helm and pulled a stone lever that quickly activated a strange engine embedded in the rear of the ship submerged underwater. Everyone looked over the edges of the ship in surprise, even Belle, who was still tied up and gagged, noticed how the ship began to move. Looking down, they noticed how all the water seemed to be pushed away by the strange engine as it propelled them forward. He pulled a second lever, and quickly everyone could notice the momentum and speed. They had to hold onto the edges to avoid falling to the ground. Belle had nowhere to hold on. Pam. Belle fell face down on the ground and quickly slid across the wooden floor throughout the ship, with his eyes swirling from all the blows he received, this under the astonished gaze of his entire family who saw him exalted. All. Belle. Poor Belle. Mysterious island. While the Hestia family and Hermes escaped from the island in a super mega Amalon ship. On the mysterious island, the Loki family was literally just getting ready to wait for the ship. Riveria and Ace were already prepared. Well, Riveria would prefer that Ace had better clothes, but she had only brought one dress, and it had been the one that was dethroned when she got lost in the forest because of that stranger. She denied. Now what Nico had left was a piece of the dress and a bra that served as a swimsuit made of leaves, although now she also had Belle's jacket on, so it covered her a little more, but it was still revealing. Perhaps he should give her his tunic to cover the rest of her waist, although it was likely that Ace would reject it. Riveria sighed lightly before turning to look at the sea, her mind still immersed in what happened in the morning. Riveria shook her head, leaving those thoughts aside. It didn't help at all to rack her brains if she didn't have any more clues to reach a conclusion. She would investigate further on her own later. For now, she would leave that aside. Once Riveria put that issue aside, he focused on the second. She turned her gaze and saw the Hestia family's camping tents a little far from her tents. Not long ago she had seen them gathering their things and preparing their suitcases, but suddenly they disappeared, them and their luggage, except for the camping tents that were left there abandoned. To her confusion, she assumed they would come back for them later. That was 10 minutes ago. Riveria had already begun to question where the Hestia familia had gone. It seemed that they had disappeared, and as soon as she looked away they had all disappeared, including the god Hermes and his captain, who had followed the Hestia familia for some reason. As Riveria looked at the tents, waiting for the Hestia familia to appear, one of the tents belonging to that family opened, revealing a woman with a non-existent figure and red hair tied in a ponytail. She emerged from the tent, hunched over and with a black aura surrounding her. Riveria looked at her curiously. Usually Loki always woke up happy, and as soon as he saw a girl he would throw himself at her and greet her, trying to touch her breasts, but now she looked completely dejected and tired. It seemed she had dark circles under her eyes, a nightmare perhaps. Riveria. What's wrong with you? Curious. Loki. I had a terrible nightmare, dragging his feet in the sand. Loki with a depressive aura walked to Riveria and sat on the sand a little away from her because he did not want to receive a blow from her staff so early. Riveria. How unusual for a god to have a nightmare, what's the deal? Looking at her. Loki. Please, I don't want to talk about that, darkening his gaze further. Riveria looked at Loki in silence for a few seconds before calmly nodding her head and downplaying the matter. If it was something important I smelled like I would have told him. It had probably just been a bad dream on her part, and that's it. While Riveria and Loki looked at the campfire in silence, Loki suddenly raised his head, realizing something, and turned to look at the Hestia family's camping tents with annoyance. Loki. And where's that dwarf's family? That's strange. I swear I heard their voices this morning, looking at the empty tents. And their things. Looking around. Riveria. I don't know, sighing, they suddenly disappeared without further ado. The only thing left here were their abandoned tents, looking at the tents. Loki. Maybe their ship arrived early and they had to leave early, shrugging. Riveria. Maybe, but I doubt it, thoughtful. Loki. Oh yeah. Why? Looking at her. Before Riveria could answer, the entrance to Aiz's tent opened and the aforementioned woman came out with her sword already at her waist, her clothing and the brown jacket on top, while she continued looking at a black blade in her hands. Loki turned to see her with a smile wanting to greet her, but as soon as he saw that characteristic brown jacket, his face turned into one of total shock while he opened his mouth in shock. Aiz? What's going on? Walking towards them. Loki, still with his mouth open like a fish, tremblingly pointed at the brown jacket while trying to say a few words. Loki is in shock. Aiz? Looking at the jacket, it's Belle's jacket, I like it smells like him, looking at her expressionlessly. Immediately all the memories of his terrible nightmare came to Loki's head, the moans, the postures, the words, everything. And suddenly, it didn't seem like a nightmare at all. Loki. Ah. Loki screamed in terror as he thought about the possibility that his nightmare could have been a very realistic dream. What happened when he heard certain things? Finally, Loki fell back onto the sand while keeping his face of total terror, he had been stunned. Riveria looked at her, feeling identified, and left her there on the sand. It would soon pass. First, it was shock, then hysterical denial. After that the reasoning and conclusion would follow, but knowing Loki she wasn't capable of that, so then he would have to explain his conclusion to her. Leaving that aside, Riveria turned to look at Aiz when she realized that she had suddenly gone silent. When she turned to look at her, she noticed how Aiz was staring at the Hestia family's camping tents. It was already obvious what she was thinking. Aiz? Where? Looking around. Riveria. They disappeared, getting up, they took all their things, the only thing they left were the camping tents, maybe they didn't have time, maybe it was something very noticeable, and they didn't want us to notice, thoughtfully. Aiz, I understand. Aiz looked down at Belle's black knife in silence, it seemed that she would have to return it to Belle when they returned to Aurario. Riveria. Don't worry, looking at her, you'll be able to see him again when we get back, smiling slightly. Aiz. Yes, it's true, smiling slightly. Aiz put the black blade in Belle's jacket pockets and sat next to Riveria while continuing to look at the Hestia family's camping tents. Aiz. When will the ship arrive? Curious. Riveria. In 2 hours, maybe you want to train a little, you could take advantage of the sand to improve your sword technique while we wait for Lafia to finish preparing and the ship to arrive, looking at her. Aiz nodded in agreement and stood up brushing the back of her dress before stepping back a bit and unsheathing her sword to train. On the other hand, in a tent that was next to Loki's and that was also near Aiz's tent, there was a shy elf with golden blonde hair and blue eyes hidden between the sheets, with her eyes wide open and in shock after having had what she could consider her worst nightmare. Lafia. What was that nightmare? Why did I dream it? What did I do to have such a cruel and realistic nightmare? Disturbed. Memories of Elodia's most recent nightmare came to mind, one she wouldn't forget for a long time. Aiz and something's coming. Aiz Belle. Lafia buried her face in the pillow and let out a loud scream of frustration. She definitely wasn't okay, it had been such a realistic dream, so descriptive, she never imagined dreaming something like that at such a level, and now that she dreamed it, it had to be with the person she admired the most and the person she hated the most, it couldn't be a worse nightmare. Lafia stood up from her house slowly with a big empty look in her eyes. The poor elf's soul had been stolen. Little did the lovely elf know that it was more than just a dream. Wooden boat super mega advanced for its time. On the wooden boat where Belle and his family were sailing to freedom, there was a certain god with a feathered hat standing by the edges of the boat while looking at the calm sea around him with a smile. For better or for worse, and although he had received a tremendous beating, he had still achieved his goal, that's right, what a beautiful man he became. Well, his original plan was to take advantage of Belle and his family going alone to a deserted island to give him the aphrodisiac and have relations with some member of his family, I mean, it was a great plan, the only one who didn't love him was Mikoto, all the others wouldn't refuse Belle, so it was the perfect plan. Besides, he had already made plans for Belle to have a lucky encounter with Hesta or Hermes, Lily was his last resort, but a virgin goddess or a former prostitute Renard was definitely better than a Palom, don't get him wrong, he didn't discriminate against any race, each one had its charm, but come on, there are better options for Hex. Although his plans went to hell as soon as the Loki family also appeared here, although not everything was so bad, there was a new possibility, how about having relations with one of the most beautiful adventurers of all? Belonging to the rival family of his goddess and a woman so desired by men that she had rejected 1,000 of them, she definitely lived up to the prestige of a virgin goddess. Oh, Zeus would be so proud of his grandson right now, he was already a man, now there was only the path of a harem, and that was almost assured, it was only a matter of Belle daring to flirt with Hestia, Hermes and Lily, and he already had a small harem of 4 girls, it couldn't be more splendid, it was definitely the perfect harem for the last hero of the current era. Hermes even puffed out his chest proudly at being the one in charge of Zeus's great wish to guide his grandson along the right path of Hermes. Before Hermes could finish that thought, he received a strong blow to the head that knocked him unconscious to the ground from a small, black-haired and tall goddess who looked at him as if he were scum. Hestia. You were probably thinking something stupid where my bellcranel is involved, weren't you? Annoyed. Hermes didn't respond, he was fainted again. Hestia just gritted her teeth in anger before returning to the others who were inside the ship, looking with concern at one of the only two rooms on the ship and the room in which Belle had locked himself again as soon as they released him. Hestia. Any progress? Worried. Lily. Nothing yet, sighing discouraged. Hermes has been talking to the door for a while, she even started telling stories about heroes, but bellcranel doesn't respond, worried. Welf. Can't we just break down the door? Looking at them. Makoto. Don't be silly, Welf Dono. You have to be tactful about these things. Would you like someone to break down your door and break down your room when you're in a difficult moment? Seriously. Welf remained silent and said nothing. He imagined Hephaestus bursting into his room and comforting himself with harsh words when he was sad. He would definitely like that, but receiving all the death glares from his companions, it was not a good idea to say something like that out loud, so he better kept quiet. While Welf received the death glares from Hestia and Lily and the disapproving look from Makoto, on the other hand, Hermes was glued to the wooden door, speaking softly to Belle to leave. Hermes. Belle-sama, I know you think you did something terrible, but please don't lock yourself away like that won't help you solve the problem, please allow us to listen and help you, we will always be here for you, please open the door, sad. There was no response, even so Hermes remained stuck to the door in silence. A minute passed, nothing. Welf and Makoto left to help with the ship at Asfi's request. 5 minutes passed, there was no response yet. Hestia and Lily were forced to move away from the room after they started fighting each other. 10 minutes passed. Hermes did not move away from the door, she stood there leaning against the door with a dejected look, her drooping ears and downward gaze were proof of that, however. Finally there was a slight response. Are you still there? Hermes' ears perked up quickly upon hearing Belle's voice. Without waiting a second, she looked up confidently and answered. Hermes, hi. You don't have to stay there, I just need to think about what I'm going to do now. Hermes stuck her hand on the door with slight sadness, she didn't want to see her hero like that, she knew that Belle felt something for the Princess of the Sword, it wasn't very difficult to notice if she was honest, she knew that she was his motivation, and although she also loved him and wanted to be with him, it hurt more to see him being unhappy and sad, so she would help him even if she wasn't with him. Hermes. Belle-sama, I'm sure the Sword Princess doesn't hate him, nor will she hate him for what happened. Mentira nada será como antes, yo abusta ella, soy una persona horrible no merezco volver la hablar, no merezco su perdón. Hermes. That's not true, you are a great, kind, gentle and caring person, I'm sure Miss Wallenstein knows it too, she'll trust you and understand when you tell her that this was Hermes-sama's fault, she won't hate you, she can't, because she loves you, smiling sadly. Hermes. You may not believe me if you wish, Belle-sama, but you must get out of there. It won't help you at all to stay locked up. What if I make things worse? Hermes. They will get worse on their own if you don't try to solve them yourself, it's better that you try and be able to achieve it than for everything to get worse on your own. I know that you feel fear, sadness and dread of what might happen, but I know that you can overcome all of that and improve the situation, you always do. How are you so sure? Hermes laughed softly and placed her hand on the door in response. Hermes. Because you are Belle-sama, smiling gratefully, I know because you faced all that to rescue me, holding her chest, and I will always be grateful, so let me help you, let me listen to you, let me be your support this time please Belle-sama, come out. Click. Hermes' ears reacted when they picked up the sound of the door lock being removed. The handle turned and the door opened slightly, revealing part of Belle's face, dejected. Hermes felt her heart clench at seeing her hero, a person as kind and gentle as Belle in that state, she had never seen him so dejected, not even when hundreds of Amazons cornered him and prevented his passage towards her and his death that seemed inevitable. Hermes. Belle-sama, sad. Belle. Hermes, do you think that she really doesn't hate me? Looking at her sadly. Hermes. I'm sure she also wants things to be resolved without them drifting apart, smiling slightly. Belle looked down at the floor and slowly opened the door, letting Hermes in. She looked at him sadly when she noticed the state he was in. Her hair was a mess if that was possible, probably from holding her head tightly all this time, some small dark circles barely noticeable from constantly rubbing her eyes, not wanting to let the tears run down her face, a sad and depressed posture and a face without spirit. Belle. I'm sorry you have to see me like this. You surely think it's pathetic, don't you? Laughing sadly. To Belle's surprise, as soon as she finished saying that, Hermes gave her a big hug and gently laid her head on Hermes' chest while she rubbed her head. Hermes. Not at all, even heroes need help sometimes, hugging him. Hermes gently hugged Belle, who returned the hug slowly before hiding her face, feeling some tears starting to come out of her eyes. "Belle. Thank you for helping me," sniff. "Thank you Hermes, thank you," crying. Hermes rested her head on Belle's and kept the hug silent. She needed to comfort him, for now she had done what Belle needed. When he calmed down she would return to help him resolve things with Aiz. Even if it hurt her, even if she wanted to be by his side, even if she wanted to be the one who made him happy, she would help him be with whoever he loved, even if it wasn't her, because for her it was enough to see Belle be happy, even if it wasn't with her, because that's what it meant to love a person, to want their happiness above your own, because she loved Belle. Haraham comforted Belle so that he would not become more depressed and sink further into sadness. On the other side of the ship were all the members of the ship around a beaten Hermes. "Hestia? Well. Why the hell did you do that?" Narrowing her eyes, he answers poorly, "And so he lent us a wide variety of torture instruments. I won't ask where he got them, seriously." Hermes sat on the trembling ground and looked up, seeing all the members of Belle's future harem according to him looking at him with annoyance. "Hermes. I assure you that I have a very good reason." 5 minutes later. Hermes was on the ground covered in bruises and blood on his face, while Lily and Welf pulled him because Lily wanted to throw him overboard and Welf wanted to avoid that. "Lily. Let him go. He deserves it for what he did to belle-sama." Pulling him angrily. "Welf. You can't, Lily Kojo. He's the god of an entire high-ranking family. We don't want any more problems with more families now." "Lily. That doesn't matter now. Either way, Loki's family will kill us when they find out. So I'll make Hermes swim with the fishes." Angry. While Welf and Lily were fighting at the helm of the ship, Asfi watched the torture of her god with complete tranquility. "Asfi. If I don't see it, I'm not an accomplice," looking away. Asfi ignored the pleas of her god and continued sailing until she began to see land in the distance. Her ship was very fast. "Asfi. We'll be there in 10 minutes, get ready," shouting. Everyone nodded to Asfi's words, and after agreeing Welf and Lily tied Hermes to the boat and left, leaving him alone and beaten. Mysterious Island. On the mysterious island that the Hestia family had recently abandoned, all the members who had already gathered around the campfire were present. Of course, none of them were as normal as usual. The serene and calm vice captain, Riveria Joe's Alf, a refined, thoughtful and calm woman, was currently staring blankly out to sea. Yes, her mind still hadn't gotten over the events from before. Although she had come to the conclusion that it was impossible for Belle and Aiz to do that, it was still a surprise for her to see Aiz so lively. Seeing Aiz wearing Belle's brown jacket after waking up as if they were a couple didn't help much. Aiz Waldstein, an expressionless girl who almost never showed her feelings, serious and focused on her goal of becoming strong, a girl who had rejected more than 1,000 men. That's right, that same girl was now in a swimsuit made of plants and with a boy's jacket on top. While she didn't realize her mind was lost thinking about that same boy, she was confused. She had started training a little so as not to think too much about Belle, but that only made her think more about him, and in the end she couldn't concentrate on training. She returned to the others and sat down again on the sand looking at the small campfire in silence. Her mind this time set out to think completely and fully about Belle and ended up lost in her thoughts, remembering her training with Belle, those 2 times they danced at Apollo's party and in the village where they hid from Ares's army, and the most recent event. His night with Belle. Aiz's cheeks reddened again at the memory. She was now fully awake and perfectly remembered the events of the previous night. The words, the kisses, the caresses. Aiz looked down and discreetly hid her face with her hands, hiding her blushing cheeks. For some reason, she felt very happy. While Aiz tried to hide her blush as best as possible, she was seen by Riveria, who stared at her silently with a blank look. Riveria. He's probably thinking about him. Riveria was proud that her daughter would finally find someone who could get her off the path of revenge, and she was also jealous. He thought that Aiz would have a partner many years later when she wasn't so attached to her revenge, but he thought that by then she would have already found a partner. It seems that things went the other way around. Rivera sighed heavily and looked at her hands. She was 99 years old and still hadn't had a single affair, truly pathetic. And now her daughter, who she thought would have a partner in a few years, seemed to have found someone before her. Did she really have such bad luck in love? Riveria lowered her head in defeat, feeling older than before when she thought about that. This was supposed to be a trip to relax a little, not to think about her misfortunes. While Aiz was in her fantasy world thinking about Belle, and Riveria in her world of misfortune, thinking about her long years without even a romantic interest, there were more people besides Riveria who were also found with a depressive aura. The goddess Loki and the apprentice of Riveria, Lafia Viridis, a shy and nervous elf with an attitude similar to Belle's. She even had the same fanaticism as him, with the only difference that this was directed towards Aiz. Both, goddess and elf, stared at the sand in shock and silence, while their heads repeated over and over again the scene of Aiz wearing a characteristic jacket that both recognized. It was the jacket of the dwarf son, her rival. None of them could believe what they saw. There was no doubt that it was bellcranel's jacket, but why was Aiz wearing it? Why did she look so happy? And why did she keep repeating his name? The two had wanted to hit him and demand explanations. In fact, they had looked for him, but it seems that he had disappeared. Riveria told them that he had left with all his things except the camping tent, so probably his boat had arrived before theirs. Once Loki and Loki gave up looking for Belle, they sat back down, defeated, doubting his existence. If you got close to them, you could even hear their pleas and murmurs about this being a nightmare too. While they were depressed thinking about what had happened, on the other hand, Riveria raised her head upon hearing the sound of a voice in the distance and saw a huge wooden ship heading from the distance to the island. Despite the great distance, Riveria could make out the tiny figure of her family's captain, Fin-damed, a Palom with blonde hair and blue eyes, who always keeps a calm smile on his face. Riveria. Well, get ready, they've already come for us, standing up. As soon as Riveria said that, everyone raised their heads, seeing the ship coming from afar. Aiz got up excitedly and ran to pick up all her things. Riveria looked at this with a drop of sweat that grew as she saw Loki and Loki drag their feet on the sand as they walked to pick up their things. Riveria. Ah, tired, what a tiring vacation. Well, this can't be considered a vacation, sighing. While the girls were getting ready to board the ship and return to Aurario, Aiz in particular was looking at Belle's black blade with a slight smile, imagining her next encounter with Belle. And Troublesome Rabbit 02. Mansion fireplace. The Chimney Mansion, the seat of the Hestia familia and their home, was a large mansion with a large lawn around it, a huge place despite lacking members having only their captain bellcranel, the vice captain Lilaruka Ard, the high executives Welf and Makoto, and the last executive Hermes. All of them made up the entire Hestia family apart from their goddess and lived fully in that mansion. Right now the entire Hestia family was in the mansion after returning from an extensive trip to an island far from Aurario at the request of a friendly god called Mychgod. For everyone it had been a fun and relaxing trip, even though Hermes had followed them without warning and had suddenly appeared to the displeasure of most of the girls. They had still been able to enjoy the island and the sea at least until their last night when a certain stupid god had to ruin all the fun because of a silly whim of his. The whim that unfortunately for them came true. Right now, Hestia, Lily, Welf and Makoto were in a hallway outside the mansion's living room, talking in low voices. Hestia. I've been feeling down the whole way, sad. Lily. Even he was avoiding us, discouraged. Welf. Give him a little time and your support, he's Belle, we know he always gets up no matter how hard they hit him, smiling confidently, I know he'll be able to face this, not for nothing he's our captain, looking sideways at the interior of the room. Across the hall, there was a wooden door that led to the living room where they usually rested after returning from the dungeon. There, sitting on the red sofas in the living room, Hermes was reading softly and with a smile a book she had in her hands. Next to her was Belle listening in silence to the story that Hermes was telling her, while her eyes seemed to begin to close little by little. Hermes. And then, the hero raised his chipped and wasted sword firmly, in front of all the monsters, and kept the princess behind him, promising her that he would save her and finish off all the monsters so they wouldn't hurt her, and with that said, the hero threw himself at the monsters, and with that sword, rusty and worn like him, he killed and knocked down each monster one by one, until the only thing left was the hero standing in the middle of all the dead monsters. Fainted and holding his trusty sword tightly, smiling. Hermes' ears twitched slightly as a noise reached her ears, and she turned her head to see Belle leaning his head back on the couch, with his eyes closed, as he seemed to mutter something about heroes. Hermes smiled slightly seeing this and closed the book gently, leaving it on the wooden table in front of her. Bernard got up from the couch and gently laid Belle down on the couch, before taking a blanket she had brought earlier and covering Belle up. Hermes. Rest bellcranel, rubbing her head. Hermes walked away slowly trying not to make any noise and left the living room seeing all her other classmates in the hallway looking at her with a smile. Hermes blushed in embarrassment and looked down while shyly playing with her fingers when she remembered that everyone had been there listening to her tell a story of heroes to Belle to make him fall asleep. Hermes. Bellcranel is already asleep, it would be better to let him rest and talk to him tomorrow, nervous. Hestia. I understand, thanks Hermes, you were a great help to Belle, smiling. Hermes' tail moved from side to side with excitement upon hearing Hestia's words and nodded happily to be of use to the family and Belle. Hestia smiled slightly seeing Hermes happy with her words and smiling shyly, while the others also thanked her for the help. After what happened on the ship, Hermes was the only one who could talk to Belle, so they stayed outside the room while they asked her to go and calm him down a bit. It was Hestia who suggested that she tell him a story about heroes, and apparently it worked quite well. Hestia. Now let's let Belle rest, he needs it, looking slightly sad at Belle. Everyone lowered their gaze a little, remembering that they hadn't solved the problem, but they were now more motivated to help Belle. He had helped them all in the past, and now it was their turn to help him. Twilight Mansion. The Twilight Mansion, a large irregular castle-shaped mansion that was the headquarters and home of the Loki family, housed many members of the family. There were a few who lived by choice outside the mansion, but more than 90% of the Loki family members lived there. Its large size also allowed it to have different areas used by the family: the dining room, the training field, the library, the meeting room, the bathrooms, etc. And that was the place where another of the victims of the evil plans of a perverse god was currently located. It was Aiz Waldstein. She was just entering the entrance of the mansion with her suitcases and the little she had packed for the trip to the island. She calmly walked and went to her room to leave her things and change, ignoring the confused looks of the members who were passing by when they saw her with a Riveria tunic around her waist and a brown jacket over it. Behind her came Riveria carrying some normal suitcases and her staff before sighing and turning her head, seeing behind her Loki and Lafia walking tirelessly while carrying backpacks that could well rival those used by the supports. Riveria. Why did you bring such big suitcases? How much did you bring? Looking at them tiredly. Lafia. Loki-sama said to bring clothes for a week, she never said we would only be there for 3 days, dragging her feet. Loki. My plan was to stay for a week and not tell any of you so you would be left without clothes, but Lafia discovered me talking to the boatman, and I had to tell her that the trip would be a week long, but I didn't want to spend so much time next to the dwarf, and I didn't know how long she would be there, so I sent a message for them to pick us up a day early. Annoyed, damn cow tits, she and her family ruined my magnificent plan, gritting her teeth. The vein popped on Riveria's head when she heard Loki's plan, and she hit him with her staff, knocking him to the ground. Although Loki was already used to it and quickly got up as if nothing had happened. Loki. Anyway, darkening his gaze, so. Do you know why my Aiz-chan was wearing the dwarf son's jacket? Seriously. Riveria. Is that all you're getting serious about? Tired, you just had a date and she forgot her jacket somewhere. Aiz found it when they'd already left and couldn't return it, so she took it with her, crossing her arms. Loki. That explains a bit, but it doesn't explain why Aiz had it on. Pointing at him. Riveria just moved Loki's finger to the other side, wondering if she should hit her again, then she had a drop of sweat when she saw how Lafia was next to Loki staring at her impatiently, also wanting to know the answer. Riveria. Sighing, Aiz is close to that boy, he is a very close friend to her, they have been training together for a while, and since their return from the hidden village after the events of Ares they are even closer. I would say that Aiz has a certain special affection for that boy, smiling, that is why she put on his jacket without a problem, because it belongs to someone special to her, do you understand, Loki? Smiling. Loki gritted his teeth in frustration, noticing Riveria's tiny but notable mocking smile as she told him those words. She was enjoying his frustration because her Aiz-chan was close to the dwarf's son, and that wasn't something Loki liked very much. While Riveria was mocking Loki and Lafia was almost dying in life, in Aiz's room was the aforementioned, leaving her suitcase on the floor and opening her closet, taking out one of her adventurer outfits. She quickly dressed, looked at her armor for a few seconds and shook her head. It was quite late, she wouldn't go to the dungeon or train with Belle, so she didn't need her armor, but something she would never go out alone with would be her trusty weapon. Desperate, Aiz placed her sword on her waist and took the black knife and carried it in her hand. Now she was ready, and Aiz left her room calmly, only to look with slight surprise at a smiling Amazon in front of her. Aiz Tiona, Mirandola. Tiona Hiryut is a close friend of Aiz. She is an energetic Amazon with messy black hair and very dull brown eyes. Like any Amazon, she wore little clothing, although precisely because she was an Amazon it was normal. Tiona. Hi Aiz. Happy, how was the trip to that island? Did you have fun? Smiling. Aiz. Yes, it was fun, expressionless. Tiona. Oh. The tone you used when you said that was a little lively. So you did have fun, huh? Happy. Aiz. Belle was there, smiling slightly. Tiona. Argonaut-kun was there. Great. Smiling, did you also have a similar mission with your family? Aiz was about to answer, but before doing so Tiona interrupted her with another question. Tiona. How did you meet? Did Belle see you in your swimsuit? Did he blush? Did he tell you were pretty? Aiz remained silent, listening to Tiona's questions. Normally she would ignore her when she saw that it would be impossible to calm her down, but this time she seriously thought about each of her questions. Aiz. A mushroom erased my memory and Belle found me, my clothes were destroyed and they gave me a swimsuit made of leaves. Belle blushed a lot when he saw me, and every time he saw me, he didn't tell me I was pretty, but I heard the god Hermes asking him about me and he said I was beautiful, blushing slightly. Tiona. Ha ha ha, laughing mischievously, is that a blush? Is it did you like it when Argonaut-kun said you were beautiful? Smiling. At Tiona's question, Aiz thought carefully about Tiona's words before nodding confidently. Aiz. I want you to tell me again, looking at her. Tiona. Wow, it seems like you know what you want, laughing lightly, I'm sure that if you ask him he'll always tell you, smiling, even if he's a little embarrassed to tell you, thoughtful. Tiona imagined Belle completely red and stuttering trying to call Aiz beautiful. Behind. From. Tiona. Huh. Didn't you want Belle to call you beautiful? Confused. Aiz. Yes, but I want him to tell me without me asking him, looking at her. Tiona. Oh wow, she's more aware than I thought, but considering that she's Belle, I find it difficult for her to call her beautiful without touching her well, it's a shame it seems that the incredible Tiona will have to intervene and give some little pushes, smiling confidently, don't worry Aiz, I'm sure that sooner or later Belle will call you beautiful, giving her a thumbs up. Aiz smiled slightly at Tiona's words and nodded gratefully for her words, Tiona knew, those words had encouraged her. Tiona. Oh, by the way, where are you going? Curious, if you don't have anything important to do, you can have dinner with me and Tian, smiling. Aiz. Sorry, it will be later, I have to return this to Belle, showing the black knife. Tiona. Ah, I see Why do you have his black blade? Curious. Aiz. I forgot them on the island, showing them. Tian remembering. Belle. The Hestia dagger. Unsheathing it. Tiona. Oh, so that's her name, it's a very good weapon Argonaut-kun. Smiling. Belle. Thank you, smiling, it's a gift from my goddess, it's very special, I value it more than my life, smiling, and it's worth more than my life, laughing darkly. Tiona. How little she values her life, laughing nervously. Aiz. Looking at her curiously. Tiona. Well, I won't keep you any longer. See you later. Saying goodbye. Aiz raised her hand in farewell and walked towards the entrance of the mansion in the direction of the fireplace mansion. Mansion fireplace. At the Hestia family headquarters, the entire family was gathered in the lounge. Hestia and Makoto were sitting in one of the large armchairs with worried looks. Welf was sitting in an individual armchair with his head down and thoughtful, while next to him, Lily was standing with her arms crossed and her eyes closed while she seemed to be cursing a certain god with a feather hat. In another large armchair, in front of the armchair where Hestia and Makoto were, Belle was sitting with his head down and silent without looking at anyone, next to him was Haraham looking at him with concern while she placed her hand on Belle's shoulder as if giving him support. Everyone looked at Belle worriedly, knowing why he was like that it was easy to understand his situation. Belle felt completely guilty and distressed, it hurt him that his relationship with Aiz would probably never be the same again, and that now they might even have a family war with the Loki family if they found out and it would get his family into serious trouble again. But what hurt the most was thinking that Aiz could be suffering right now because of him, thinking that a friend you trust had taken your trust and abused you sounded horrendous, and Belle couldn't even imagine how bad he must feel, because he had been the abuser, even if he was also suffering Aiz could be much worse, and the fact of hurting the person he loved and admired the most broke his heart. He no longer felt worthy of being by her side, nor of being her hero, he was nothing more than a vile villain, who did not deserve anyone's comfort or the support of his family. Belle. I am a disgusting person, with his head down. Hestia. Belle-kun, worried, none of this was your fault, you are not a disgusting or bad person, you are just another victim of the selfish desires of a god, clenching his fists. Lily. We have to take revenge on that stupid god, sharpening her gaze. Welf. What? You want to send him back to the Tenkai? Looking at her. Lily. That's too good for him, we'd better kidnap him and ask his family for a ransom of millions of valis, laughing darkly. Welf. You only think about money, sighing, besides, do you think his family would pay to rescue him? Lily. Good point, thoughtful. While Welf and Lily seemed to agree on a plan against the messenger god, on the other hand, Hestia continued talking to Belle, trying to cheer him up. Belle. She must be devastated right now, someone abused her, I deserve to die, with his gaze off. Hestia slammed her hands on the table and looked seriously at Belle who didn't even get excited. Hestia. Bellcranel, you are a wonderful person with a big heart. If you ever found a monster that asked you for help, you would probably do it. You would never do anything wrong, and I'm sure Aiz knows it too. She would never hate you, and if you told her what happened, I have no doubt that she would fully believe you and take your side. She would be serious. You weren't to blame for anything, and you don't deserve to suffer because of the stupidities of an ambitious and selfish god. Neither you nor anyone else. Standing up. Look me in the eyes, Belle-kun, looking at him. Belle. Belle remained silent for a few seconds before slowly looking up under the expectant gaze of everyone watching his conversation with Hestia. Hestia looked at Belle's face with anguish, a lifeless face and empty eyes without any hope within them. Belle was nothing more than a child, a dreamy child who, although he had faced many dangerous situations in his short time as an adventurer, had managed to stay strong and with great determination for only one reason, a golden longing. But now that he believed he had damaged that golden yearning, his determination and conviction were meaningless. They could not support him, they could not hold him up to prevent him from collapsing. Now he was alone. Oh, that's what Belle felt. It was true, he didn't have his determination or conviction on his side, but his family was still with him, and for them he wasn't guilty of anything nor a horrible being, even if Belle didn't agree with that. Hestia. Maybe it's hasty, but I need a way to motivate him. Oh yeah, no. Hestia imagined Belle's ability, Lyra's Frez disappearing from his state upon losing his conviction. Hestia. As much as I dislike it, Lyra's Frez has kept Belle standing many times. With the ability comes the determination and the reason to get up from Belle. If he loses the ability, it will be almost impossible for Belle to be the same. It is risky, but looking at him, Belle-kun, won't you do anything? Belle looked at Hestia slightly without understanding what she meant. Hestia. Are you just going to stand there and lament what happened? Seriously, are you not even going to try to apologize or redeem yourself? Are you not going to do anything to make it up to the Sword Princess for what happened? Are you just going to stand here and not accept responsibility for what you did? Staring at him. Harahim. Hestia-sama, I don't think. Hestia's silence Harahim would be, tell me Belle-kun, what will you do? Belle. I have to apologize and make it up to him. I have to apologize, looking at the floor. Hestia. You can't just sit there feeling sorry for a mistake you haven't even apologized for. You have to take responsibility for your actions. Crossing her arms, do you understand, Belle-kun? Looking at him. Belle. Hi, I must apologize to Aiz and the Loki family, ask for their forgiveness for what I did and compensate them. I have no right to feel bad. If I really feel bad I should ask for forgiveness, slightly raising his head. Hestia. Exactly. You must compensate them with something of value, as they have apologized very sincerely. Belle. I have nothing of value to give you, and the dagger is yours, Kami-sama, and I am no longer worthy of using it, serious. Hestia. Huh. Well, I'm glad you don't want to sell the dagger, but it's yours, it's literally made for why. Belle. You're right, I must give them something of value, it's the least I can do, apologizing won't be enough, I'll gather a lot of money and give it to them, I'm going to gather 10 million valis to give it to them, standing up. Belle got up from the sofa and ran out of the room under the gaze of everyone who looked at him in surprise. Hestia. Wait. You misunderstood me. You don't have to give them that much money. 100 was more than enough. Excited. Harahim stood up from the sofa and reached out for Belle, but the door closed behind him, leaving everyone perplexed. Welf. One more problem. Lily. Lily thinks we should follow Belle-sama before she gets hurt, it would be. Harahim. Come on, we need to support him, worried. Lily and Welf were about to get up and follow Harahim if Makoto hadn't stopped them. Makoto. Stop. It would be. Harahim. What's going on? We have to follow Belle-sama, worried. Makoto. It will be of no use trying to help him if we don't have our weapons, looking at each other. Welf and Lily were left blank seeing that they didn't have any weapons, and in fact they were already in pajamas. They had arrived in the morning, but they didn't plan to go to the dungeon, so there was no need to have their adventure clothes, and well, maybe it wasn't a good option. Harahim. That doesn't matter anymore. Let's go find Belle-sama. Worried. Lily and Welf started to sweat and search the room for something that would work at least as a weapon. Makoto, on the other hand, looked at her silently before calmly shrugging her shoulders. Makoto. Going into the dungeon with no weapons or equipment while following our captain who also had no equipment. I don't know, it doesn't seem very safe to me and well, let's do it. Smiling confidently, it's a good way to test myself. Makoto got up from the sofa with a big smile full of confidence and ran towards the door, being the first to open it to go towards the entrance exit of the aforementioned fireplace, being followed by Lily, Welf and Harahim, who were hot on her heels. Lily. Well, keeping some chopsticks, it was the best weapon I found. Welf. Looking at a stone in his hand, well, what does it matter, another day in the Hestia family, calm. Makoto. I can kill monsters with my bare hands. She didn't bring anything. Harahim. We must help Belle-sama at all costs. Before Harahim finished talking to herself, and before they opened the gate of the bars that were around the fireplace mansion, everyone stopped abruptly when they saw a girl with golden hair and eyes appear at the entrance of the bars, with a wrapped object in her hand. It was Aiz Waldstein, Sword Princess, and the girl who had hex with Belle under the influence of an aphrodisiac. It was Aiz Waldstein, the girl who had hex with Belle for an aphrodisiac. The four stopped abruptly in front of the entrance to the gates and stared at Aiz with surprise and slight shock. Aiz looked at them curiously at their excited states and slightly raised her hand to wave as she opened her mouth to say something. However, before saying a word, Lily and Welf went blank and quickly made a doggies on the ground asking for forgiveness and saying that they accepted their captain's blame for the. Aiz became even more confused and opened her mouth again to say something but was interrupted again, this time by Makoto, who got into a battle stance and looked at her seriously. Makoto. I don't care that he's 4 levels higher than me. If he wants revenge on Belle Dono, he'll have to step over our dead body first. Before finishing, Makoto was knocked to the ground by Lily and Welf, who forced her to do a doggies by burying her head in the ground. Makoto jajbsisp, spitting grass. While Makoto was forced to eat grass, on the other hand, Haraham looked nervously at Aiz, who looked at her as she was the only one she could talk to now. Aiz. Is Belle there? Looking at her. Haraham. Hey, well, nervous. Why are you looking for him, Miss Wallenstein? Nervous. Haraham began to sweat from nerves, trying to calm her slightly trembling body as she imagined that at any moment Aiz could pounce on them and kill them for being friends and part of the family of her abuser. Although, if he had to die so that Belle wouldn't suffer the consequences, then he would proudly give his life. Aiz. Are you okay? Aiz looked at Haraham in silence. She was shaking like jelly while sweating intensely and looked at her, trying to tell her something, but she only stuttered. Haraham nerviosa. Aiz. Maybe I should go in and check if she's fine. Aiz held one of the designs of the gate and was going to open it if Haraham didn't stand in front of her, waving her arms comically and nervously. Haraham. Belle-sama isn't here right now, nervous, why were you looking for him? Smiling nervously. Aiz. Isn't it there? I wanted to give you something back, that's all. Haraham y las tres que estaban haciendo una doggies así imaginarian Aiz empleando con su espada, a Belle, y luego a todos els al escuchar las palabras, quería devolver algo quería cobrar venganza por lo que hizo Belle. They didn't know and it was probably better not to know. Aiz. Where is she? Looking at her. Haraham. Well, that's a family secret, I hope you understand, sweating. Aiz. Thoughtful, can I enter the mansion? Immediately the 4 of them were alarmed upon hearing that. Did she want to kill them inside so the people around wouldn't see her? Just imagining that scared the 4 of them. Haraham. Well, it's already very late, so I don't think it's a good option. Aiz. And Belle. Haraham. Belle-sama is trying very hard, he's in the dungeon training and getting money, I don't think it's a good idea to look for him now, smiling nervously, you can come back tomorrow afternoon to settle the matter you want, until then have a good day, bowing. After saying goodbye cordially to Aiz, Lily and Welf lifted Makoto from the ground and the 4 of them ran towards the fireplace mansion under the gaze of Aiz, who watched them in silence. Aiz. I understand, I guess I'll return it tomorrow. Aiz took the black dagger out of the sheath in her hands and imagined Belle fighting in the dungeon. Aiz. Even now, he's still in the dungeon, hint. Suggesting the dagger, is that why he's so strong? Why is he trying so hard? Thoughtfully. Aiz imagined Belle and remembered the time they found him fighting to the death against a Crimson Minotaur. For a level 6, it was a simple battle and they would easily win, but everyone who was there could feel it, the emotion, the determination and the conviction of Belle when fighting equally against a beast that should have been able to completely overwhelm him. Aiz. He's great, blushing. Aiz stuck the dagger to her chest and remained silent for a few seconds before walking back towards her family's mansion. She hadn't noticed it, but her mind all day had been focused on one thing, one person. Bellcranel. Dungeon. On the first floors of the dungeon, Belle was running quickly between the floors, desperately searching for monsters. Finally, after a few seconds of running, the walls broke and from there a small goblin was born, which turned to look at him angrily. Goblin Gra. The goblin had been born with a natural weapon, a small mace like the goblin, a weak stone weapon that could barely withstand impacts from a quality weapon. For a novice, a goblin could be a troublesome monster, especially in a group, but for a level 3 adventure, they were nothing more than a mere joke. Belle looked at him silently and directed his hand to take his black knife, however his eyes widened in shock when he couldn't feel the handle of his knife. Belle. And the hestia dagger. In shock. Belle continued searching his pockets and holsters trying to find his weapon, but nothing, he had lost it for the second time, although this time it was very likely that he left it on the island. Belle fell to his knees in shock, not feeling the grip of Hestia's dagger. Belle. I left her on the island, in shock. The goblin watched Belle fall to his knees and turned to him furiously, raising his small mace above his head to strike him. Belle stared at the ground in shock until he saw the silhouette of the goblin in front of him, with the mace raised above his head, before quickly bringing it down, ready to strike him. Punch. The blow echoed throughout the tunnel, and the goblin gave a nasty smile when he saw that his blow connected directly with Belle's head. However, his happy face changed to one of surprise when he saw that Belle raised his hand and calmly took the mallet away from his face. Goblin ugh. Belle. Belle looked at the goblin in silence and calmly got up from the ground under the fearful gaze of the goblin, seeing that his blow had done nothing to Belle. Belle for his part touched his face slowly without feeling any wound. That's right, the body of a level 3 was strong enough to receive the blows of the weakest monsters without receiving damage. Belle looked down and saw the goblin who, upon noticing his gaze, began to tremble in fear and dropped his stone mace, letting it fall to the ground. Belle. Forgive me, I have to make up for what I did. The trembling goblin watched Belle raise his fist and punch. Belle's fist connected at high speed with the goblin's head, which immediately exploded into blood. The goblin's body quickly turned into dust and dropped his magic stone to the ground, which was picked up by Belle, who silently kept it. Belle. I even lost my gun, I'm an idiot. Looking down, I must make up for it, I must make up for everything. Belle turned his head, seeing the dungeon walls cracking, giving birth to more goblins and kobolds, the weakest monsters in the dungeon. Belle. Excuse me, I don't have my knife. Monsters. Gra. Punch punch punch. Brya. Fireplace mansion. In the fireplace mansion, the entire Hestia family was gathered. It was daytime, they had recently woken up hoping to find Belle, but he hadn't returned yet. This situation seemed similar to Hestia when Belle didn't return from dinner at a bar that night and came back covered in blood after spending the whole night in the dungeon. I had a feeling the same thing would happen now. And indeed, the same thing happened. The doors to the room opened slowly and everyone quickly stood up, worried, looking at the door. The head of white hair appeared and a slightly hunched body with its head bowed appeared, taking slow and clumsy steps. Drip. The floor was stained with drops of blood falling from the torn knuckles of Belle's fists. His brown gloves were torn and bloody, his clothes were dirty and torn, his hair was disheveled and stained with blood, and his steps were clumsy, as if he were going to lose his balance at any second. With one of his hands he was dragging a leather bag from which they could hear the sound of stones colliding with each other. Belle hello, raising his hand. Belle collapsed on the ground and immediately everyone was by his side holding his body worriedly. Hermes hugged him and with the help of Makoto and Welf, they put him on the sofa resting his head on Hermes' lap while Makoto ran to Maich's pharmacy to ask them for help. Lily. What happened to him? Excited. Hestia. Well, it seems that he was fighting in the dungeon, taking off his broken gloves, Belle-kun. Hestia gently touched Belle's hands, noticing his torn knuckles. It looked like he had been fighting with his bare hands. Welf. You little idiot, don't go to the dungeon if you don't have a weapon, pulling bandages. Welf spread the bandages and with Hestia's help, he began to gently bandage his hands, but not before pouring some alcohol, while Lily ran to check if she had any potions. Belle gritted his teeth and moved in pain, feeling the burning in his wounds. Hermes looked at him in anguish and caressed his face to calm him, seeing his wounds. Hermes. It's okay, she tried hard today, please rest belle-sama, rest. Welf. You must have looked great killing monsters with your fists, my friend, you did amazing, now try to rest, putting his hand on his shoulder. Hestia. Belle-kun fool, you said you wouldn't do something like this again, sighing, Hestia sat in a chair next to the couch and looked worriedly at Belle, who was now sleeping silently already bandaged. Belle make up for it what I did, sleeping. And. A little close, 03. Every day closer to romance and to them finding out that Aiz is pregnant. The day was a beautiful day in Arario. Except for a certain group of people who had something in common. Meet a rabbit. The Hestia family was slightly sad watching their captain sleep covered in bandages while being checked by a dog beastman named Naza, a doctor friend who normally provided them with potions and basic medical equipment like bandages and such. The beastman dog had slightly long hair, a brownish-brown color and violet eyes, accompanied by a calm look, his dog ears were droopy style, and his tail was the same color as his hair, and also fluffy. Naza was next to Belle removing the bandages that had been put on him before and seeing the state he was in. After a while of examining the wounds and bandaging them again, except for the most serious ones, which he gave a potion to, he put his things away and got up, letting Hermes take care of him. Naza approached the others who looked at her worriedly and asking for an answer. Hermes, who was still giving a lap pillow to Belle, also looked at her with anguish. Naza looked at all the worried looks and sighed tiredly. Naza. Calm down, he'll be fine, he's been worse before, searching his pocket. Everyone sighed in relief upon hearing his words and watched as Naza took a sheet of paper out of his pocket. Naza. I know your budget and I don't want to be demanding, so I let your wounds heal on their own, and the most serious or infected ones I'll cure with a normal potion that closed the wounds and eliminated the bacteria and infections. Writing, this is the bill, giving it to Hestia. Hestia took the bill and looked at it before sighing, seeing the price of a meal for two from the hostess on a medicine bill. Hestia. Well, it was certainly cheaper than other places, thank you very much Naza, looking at her. Naza nodded calmly and turned to look. Hermes, who looked calmer and with a slight smile at Belle, continued gently rubbing his head, seeing how it seemed to make him sleep more peacefully. Naza. I leave Belle's care in your hands, Hermes. You are the most suitable person to take care of him, keeping his things. You are like a worried mother, so take good care of him. Hermes huh? Surprised. Naza. I know Belle is going through some problems, and you were the only one who could calm him down. It's obvious that you are special to him, and that he calms down more with you by his side. Looking at her, you care a lot about him. You remind me of some mothers who come with their children for us to take care of them, so please take care of him like one, at least until he recovers. Looking at Belle. Hermes. A mother, looking at Belle. Naza. Well, that's all, leaving, don't let him go to the dungeon for a while, I doubt you can stop him, so at least make sure you accompany him and this time well armed, staring at them. Lily. It's clear to us, sweating. Welf. As clear as water. Makoto. We'll be sure to accompany Belle Dono to the end of the world. It would be. Naza. Very well then I'm leaving. The door closed and everyone sat back down on the couches around watching Belle rest. Lily. Poor Belle-sama, did this affect her that much? Looking at her worriedly. Hestia. That's how she handles her determination, she fights until she can't anymore, sighing, that's how it is Belle-kun. Makoto. I'll go make breakfast for when Belle Dono wakes up, going to the kitchen. Welf. I'll take the opportunity to go repair his armor, Naza isn't lying when she says he'll need it, getting up, take good care of him, Hermes, our captain is in your care, saying goodbye. Welf also left the room leaving Hermes, Hestia and Lily in Belle's care. Hestia. Watching Belle sleep, hey Hermes, looking at her. Hermes. Hi. Curious. Hestia. I'm a little jealous of you, laughing darkly. Hermes huh? Surprised. Lily. Certainly you're giving Belle-sama a lap pillow, Lily also can't help but feel a little jealous, staring. Hermes blushed in embarrassment, also remembering what she was doing and covered her face with her hands trying to hide her blush. Hermes. And don't say that, I'm just doing it because Belle-sama needs it to rest, embarrassed. Hestia. Yeah, looking at her jealously, you're right, think of this as if you're doing it just to take care of Belle, like a mother, yeah. That's it. Pointing at her, make sure you take care of Belle-kun like his mother, always think about his well-being, Hermes, that's what a mother does. Crossing her arms. Hermes. A mother, looking at Belle. Hestia. That's right, smiling. Hermes looked at Belle silently before shifting her gaze to a determined one. Hermes. Hi. I'll take care of him like a mother. Motivated. Lily. How quickly he convinced her, looking. Lily sighed heavily and looked at the ground in silence, attracting the attention of Hermes and Hestia. Lily. Lily still can't believe that Belle-sama had hex with the sword princess, sighing. Both Hestia and Hermes blushed immediately upon hearing Lily's words, they couldn't help but faintly imagine Belle and Ace doing certain improper acts. They both adjusted their blushing heads and looked at Lily in embarrassment. Hestia. Why the hell do you say things like that so simply? Be a little more tactful about the subject. Smiling. Hermes. I don't think it's good to mention it, besides, anyone would feel proud, but for Belle-sama, it wasn't like that, rubbing her hair. I can't say that Belle-sama didn't want to do it with the sword princess at some point, but I'm sure he didn't want things to happen this way, it's all the fault of the god Hermes, looking at Belle worriedly. Hestia. True, sighing, that idiot god and his stupidity, I don't like the idea, but Belle-kun tries so hard to catch up with the sword princess and Hermes ruins everything, couldn't he have given them a little more time? That idiot had to rush things too much, gritting teeth. Lily. She says that as if she were sure that Belle-sama and the princess would have relations, looking at her. Hestia. I'm not that clever, support indirectly, Belle-kun already rejected me, saying that humans and gods could never have a relationship, and he tries so hard for her, that I know that sooner or later they would have had a relationship. I have prepared myself to one day see even his children and grandchildren, sighing discouraged, everything became clearer to me, after he came to rescue me from Ares. For anyone, it would be something romantic, something like that. A hero rescuing a goddess who loves him from an idiot god and taking refuge in a hidden village alone, I would have liked that and to be able to take advantage of having a moment with Belle-kun, but… Lily. Belle-sama wasn't the only one with you, looking at her. Hestia. There was a special festival in the village. There was a moment where couples or interested parties began to dance alone. I was the one who saw everything. Wallenstein had no problems dancing with Belle, around a large bonfire, being encouraged by the others. I saw everything in silence, their smiles, their steps, their dance, their attitude. Believe me, Belle was completely in love with Wallenstein. And honestly, the way things were going between them, in a short time, they would soon be something more than friends. It was more than clear to me that day that I had no chances, smiling sadly. Hermes. Hestia-sama, I know, I also accepted it a while ago, smiling sadly, since I knew I was in love. I knew that Belle-sama could not reciprocate my feelings, and since I saw him interact for the first time with Wallenstein-san, I knew it would be useless to try to overcome her. Belle-sama would not abandon his golden longing. He is not one of those who give up that easily. Looking at him. Lily, tch, take off those gloomy faces, you're just making the atmosphere sad. Annoyed. Hermes. I'm sorry. Lily. You say you've stopped trying, but it seems like you at least want to take advantage of the opportunities to be with Belle. Looking at her. Hermes understood what he meant and looked at Belle resting on her lap. He no longer looked tired or sore from his injuries, and that made her happy. Hermes. I like being by his side, and I do this knowing that I will never go further with Belle-sama. Yesterday I decided that I would help him and support him with all my being so that he could be happy with the Princess of the Sword. Smiling sadly, I love him a lot. He is my hero and my fantasy, and that is why I wish his happiness above mine, even if I have to put aside my own wishes to support his. Hermes gently took Belle's hand and joined their hands with a sad smile and drooping ears. Hermes. A mother, yes, that's the closest I can be to Belle-sama, and I'm fine with that. Separating her hand, as long as he's happy, it's enough for me to help him and support him, even if he sees me only as that, as a mother, so at least make sure I'm the best mother for Belle-sama. Smiling. Hermes' ears perked up animatedly and her tail wagged slightly. She had let go of her sadness and desires, and she was okay with that. Why did she do it for Belle? Hermes. If he is happy, I will be happy too, and that's fine. Hugging him, it saddens me to see him because he is suffering a lot from what is happening. That's why I must help him in everything I can, so that he is with the Princess of the Sword. Hermes hugged Belle gently and carefully pressed her head to her chest. She was worried. She didn't know what would happen from now on, or how things would turn out, but at least she would make sure to give Belle all her help, so that she could be happy again. Hestia and Lily listened to Hermes' words in silence. Both looked at her dejectedly. They felt selfish for loving and wanting Belle to be with them before he was happy. Hestia. Belle-kun has helped us all many times. In one way or another, he has given us the motivation and help to overcome various adversities, or shown us another path to choose. Without him, the Hestia family would not be what it is today. Without him, there would not be this enormous mansion. Without him, you would not be here. Lily. Without him, Lily would have lived much longer, living in the garbage and in debt. Looking at him dejectedly. Hermes. Without him I would have abandoned my hopes and died. Rubbing her head. Hestia. You've helped us a lot by putting our problems on top of yours. It's time for us to help you be happy. It would be. Oh hi. A slight sound of annoyance came from Belle, and the three quickly and worriedly turned to look at him. Inside Belle's head, he was having a peculiar dream. Belle had no idea where he was. He felt light. It felt like there was no floor under his feet. His body felt limp, as if floating in water, and without the ability to exert force. He was helpless, yet at the same time he felt warm, protected, safe. It was a comforting feeling. Everything around him seemed black, he seemed to be floating in infinity. That would scare many, but he felt so warm and protected that it was impossible to feel fear at that moment. But still he had a strange feeling of sadness in him, as if something was missing. And while Belle stood in the center of darkness, a voice echoed in the distance. Belle. Belle reacted instantly. It was a soft and melodious voice, a voice that I recognized very well, and that I had only heard once with a tone as lively and melodious as that one. Aiz, looking around. This time, even though Belle felt calm, he couldn't help but get a little excited and look around, hoping to find that voice that had resonated everywhere. He looked around, looked and looked but saw nothing but black. Despair flooded him, he couldn't find what he longed for, he couldn't find his light, he couldn't find what he was missing. He felt safe, but he felt alone. Belle closed his eyes and curled into the fetal position. He was scared, he was alone, he was helpless, he was. Belle. There it was again. The voice, a soft and melodious voice belonging to a beautiful girl with golden hair who repeated his name, just like that day when they danced together around a bonfire. Just hearing his voice, that feeling of loneliness disappeared and a feeling of hope flooded his entire being. Belle wanted to look for her again, this time more animated, this time determined to find her, but when he opened his eyes she was already in front of him. Like a light of hope in the midst of all the darkness, she appeared shining in an intense gold before him, looking at him with a small smile that only he had had the privilege of seeing so many times. Belle. Suddenly everything around him changed. I was no longer floating in the black infinity. Now he could recognize the place. He was lying on the wall where he used to train with Aiz daily, he could feel the stone floor beneath him, the light dazzled him for a second, but he could see the bright and vivid blue sky above him. His head felt familiarly comfortable, lying on top of something that seemed to be comforting and warm. Belle recognized that feeling, it was unmistakable, he had been privileged to have received it so many times that it would be impossible to forget, a lap pillow. A lap pillow that made him forget every problem, every worry, every negative feeling, and instead, a great calm flooded him. His vision cleared a little. And he saw above him the silhouette of a golden mane looking at him calmly. Her golden eyes were the first thing Belle could see, and it was enough to look with admiration and longing at the golden-haired girl's face, while an inevitable blush invaded her cheeks. Aiz Waldstein, his golden yearning, his light, his motivation, was her, giving him once again one of those lap pillows that always replenished his energy, no matter how hard the training was. Belle remained silent, watching with a sparkle in his eyes that beautiful golden hair being swayed by the wind. A soft, loving smile spread across the princess's face, and Belle's cheeks blushed brightly. Belle's hand, staring at her. Aiz extended her hands and took him by the cheeks, her touch was enough to fill Belle with life, and his look of shock changed to one of emotion. Aiz. Are you okay? There it was again, his voice, soft and warm, with a tone of concern for the. I almost prevented him from remembering everything that had happened. The memory of a red thank you came to Belle's mind, who slightly darkened his gaze and spoke sincerely. Belle. No, I'm not well, downcast. The happiness within him began to fade and was replaced by the anguish that came from thinking of not being with his desire. It was a fantasy, he knew it, but still, he didn't want to leave this fantasy where his longing spoke to him with the angelic voice that once said his name. Aiz. Why? Caressing her face. Belle. I hurt you, I could never forgive myself for doing something like that, dejected. Belle wouldn't say all this if it weren't for the calm that flooded his interior, he felt so calm that talking about this wasn't so difficult, just sad. Belle. I shouldn't be with you. Aiz looked at him in silence for a few seconds, during which Belle waited for an answer that didn't take long to arrive. Aiz. You would never hurt me, hugging him. Belle blushed slightly from the hug but looked away, he didn't feel worthy of receiving this treatment and he felt worse for not denying it. Belle. But I did it, I hurt you. And that's unforgivable to me. Looking away, you must hate me for what I did. Aiz. Belle, there is only one thing I hate in the world and you managed to calm that hatred I had for it, smiling softly, I need you, I can't stand being separated from you, rubbing her face. Belle opened his eyes and looked at Aiz with hope, maybe it was a dream, but this dream had given him back a little hope that Aiz didn't hate him. Belle. Aiz. Aiz smiled softly at him and everything began to fade away, instead of feeling afraid, Belle looked up with motivation. Belle. I promise to make you forget that hatred. Exalted, Aiz. Belle also began to disappear and with a last cry he said his feelings. Belle. I love you, Aiz. Finally Belle also faded away. Twilight Mansion. In the Twilight Mansion, home of the Loki family, in one of the simplest individual rooms, there was a white bed on which lay a golden-haired girl resting peacefully after a long journey. She was still sleeping, even though she should have woken up 1 hour ago, she was still resting, she had fallen deeply asleep and she didn't seem to want to abandon her pleasant dream either. His expression was calm and he even seemed happy, he was dreaming that he was on the wall where he trains next to Belle, giving him a lap pillow while he caressed his soft hair and talked to him. But suddenly his dream changed. And she saw Belle in the middle of darkness extend his hand towards her with a look full of motivation. Belle. I promise to make you forget that hatred. Exalted, Aiz. Belle slowly faded away, but you don't feel like saying any last words. I love you, Aiz. Aiz's eyes opened abruptly and she got up from her bed in surprise, feeling herself seem to sweat. Aiz. Belle, looking around. As was obvious, there was no one there. Aiz shook her head and calmed down, she held her cheeks with curiosity, noticing how hot they were, something strange that only happened to her when Belle was next to her. In the end, Aiz put those thoughts aside and got up quickly from his bed in his pajamas. Today he had to hand over the knife. Fireplace Mansion. Belle frowned slightly before slowly opening his eyes to prevent the light in the room from hurting his eyes. Once his vision adjusted to the light, he looked in bewilderment at his friends and his goddess, who looked at him with concern. Belle. What happened? Puzzled. Belle looked up and saw Hermes looking at him with a small smile of happiness. Hermes. I'm glad to see you're awake, Belle-sama, I was very worried about you, rubbing her head. Belle. Puzzled. Belle looked around in surprise, trying to locate himself until he managed to notice where he was. He was in the living room of the fireplace mansion, lying on one of the large sofas they had there. Around him were his goddess and Lily looking at him worriedly, and above him, he could see Hermes' head looking at him with a smile. A strange feeling of familiarity ran through him as he felt his head resting on something soft and comfortable. He couldn't help but remember when Aiz would give him lap pillows on the wall after making him faint in the middle of his training. Yes, it was the same feeling of comfort. So. Belle. Lap pillow. Looking at Hermes. Hermes, huh? Confused. Hermes opened her eyes slightly, remembering that she had been giving Belle a lap pillow all this time, and now that she woke up, Belle had quickly noticed it, causing Hermes to blush, who looked away a little embarrassed. Hermes. Why yes, I'm sorry, he looked very tired and was hurt, so we needed to lay him down and treat him quickly. I thought giving him a lap pillow would be best, shy. Hermes looked at Belle and quickly her gaze changed to one of concern when she saw Belle's eyes. They didn't seem to give off that shine they always showed, they didn't seem to have the same motivation, on the contrary, they seemed defeated, dejected, empty. Belle. I see, thanks, smiling. Hesta and Lily could also notice it, that empty smile that Belle tried to show them as normal for me to worry them, it was always like that, thinking about not harming others more than himself. Belle. I'm sorry I worried you all so much and hurt myself by going to the dungeon on my own. I'm an idiot again. I'm sorry for making you worry so much, looking down. Belle's tone was tired, it was normal after having spent a whole night in the dungeon, but she also seemed listless, depressed, she even seemed like she didn't want to talk, but she tried hard to appear well. Hermes quickly hugged him, slightly surprising and disconcerting Belle, who looked at her in bewilderment, noticing how sad she seemed when she hugged him. Belle. Hermes. Looking at her. Hermes. You don't have to apologize for anything, Belle-sama, you will never be a bother to us, much less, you have helped us a lot and put us above you, when it should be the other way around, looking at him. Hestia. That's right, Belle-kun, we couldn't be happier to help you, smiling gently, no matter how difficult things seem, we will be here to give you our support. Lily. So don't apologize to us, it's a pleasure for Lily to be able to help you when you need us, at any time, in any situation, don't doubt that you'll have our support, smiling confidently. Hermes. Even if there doesn't seem to be a solution, or even if it seems impossible, we'll make it happen. You'll have our help and support at all times. Smiling with motivation. The three of them looked at Belle with confidence, they could never forget the love they felt for Belle, or how special he made them feel with just a few words, but there were no doubts anymore, they would help him and support him, their priority was to see him happy. Belle. Girls, thank you, smiling slightly. Belle heard the three of them's words and cheered up a little. They were sincere and comforting words, and right now they really would help him not to be so depressed. How could he be? He still had a lot of things to fix, he still had to apologize and take responsibility for what he did. He couldn't be running away because he was terrified of having ruined things with Aiz, he had already worried his family a lot, and he would have also ignored his initial problem too much. Belle gently got up from Hermes' lap and sat next to her with a calmer look, he still wasn't the same as before, the guilt was still there, constantly eating away at him from his head, but his will was stronger, he had suffered enough, now he had to get up and fix things. Belle looked up and observed those who had just supported him. The three smiled with joy and confidence seeing Belle, they all noticed again that confident and determined look of Belle's return, he did not have the same brightness, he looked tired and somewhat dejected, but there were still traces of the previous Belle that had not disappeared and that could grow again. That same smile and innocent fanciful look of a little boy was no longer there, but it hadn't completely vanished either. Bellcranel had not lost his motivation. And even though he thought he might have harmed his longing, he thought about taking responsibility for everything, his longing was still there, empowering him and giving him the determination to move forward. Belle. I'm sorry to ask so much of you, but please help me redeem what I did, bowing. Hestia. Belle-kun, even if you didn't ask for it, you always have our support, smiling. Lily. Sometimes Lily may not agree with Belle-sama's decisions, but if you are so confident in going ahead, Lily will make sure things turn out successfully, smiling confidently. Hermes watched with a smile as Belle seemed to be recovering his spirits with her words, she knew they wouldn't be enough to fix everything at once, but that's what actions were for, and they would be there doing what was necessary to help Belle. Belle opened his eyes slightly in surprise and turned to his side, seeing Hermes rub his head gently, like a little boy she was proud of. She did it unconsciously, and Belle could see her happy smile at seeing him already animated again. Hestia and Lily just looked at this with disdain and looked away, it was certainly still somewhat uncomfortable to see Belle's close interactions with some girl. After a few seconds Hermes realized what she was doing and blushed heavily without removing her hand from Belle's head. Hermes me, nervous. Belle watched her silently before smiling slightly, a tired smile, but a real smile, no longer an empty one. And that made everyone very happy. Pam. The living room door slammed shut and the four of them turned their heads in surprise, seeing Makoto with several plates of food on top of her. It was surprising to see how she balanced them and walked with them without dropping them. There was no doubt that she was the member who liked to take the most risks. Makoto. I already made dinner. Smiling. Makoto quickly saw the four and focused on Belle looking at him with slight surprise. Makoto. Belle dono. Makoto quickly left the plates of food on the table and soon went to the others and saw Belle with a confident smile on his face. Makoto. You look in better spirits, Belle dono. Smiling, next time, don't leave the dungeon without us. I assure you we won't delay you. Looking at him. Belle. I'm sorry about that, looking down. Makoto. Don't worry, I understand, I also wanted to go to the dungeon by myself once to prove to take Mikazuchi-sama that I am worthy of him, smiling proudly. Hestia. Ah, I remember Take talking about that, he says you came back crawling and staining the floors with blood, looking at her. Makoto. That's right. Hestia. But it wasn't that bad because after that Take took care of you for 3 days while you healed, right? Curious. Makoto. That's right, my plan failed successfully, crossing her arms proudly. Lily. Somehow Lily thinks that was the plan all along, squinting. While Makoto told her adventure, Belle watched her argue with Lily and Hestia with a smile on his face. He was glad to see that the atmosphere was a little more lively again. Paraham. Let's eat, smiling. As if it were a call, the door opened softly this time and Welf entered with his hammer in hand and sweating. Welf. Did they say food? Entering. Makoto. Hi, breakfast is ready, take whatever you like. With spirits already higher, everyone got up and went to the large table to eat while having a usual conversation about trivial things. Twilight Mansion. At the Loki family headquarters, more specifically in the mansion's large dining room, several family members were having a quiet breakfast. Some trivial and unimportant conversations could be heard, but none of them were of importance. Oh, something like that. At one of the many large tables in the dining room, a group of friends were having breakfast quietly while having a trivial conversation. There, sitting there were 2 Amazons and a golden-haired girl having breakfast. Hein. Ah, I would have liked to go to that island too, but the captain was going to be very lonely and I had to stay and keep him company, eating. Tiona. It was your fault that neither of us went too, sighing, it would have been a lot of fun and I would have liked to see Argonaut-kun and Ace. Oh, by the way, tell me Ace, what else did you do on your trip? You were able to swim a little, smiling. The golden-haired girl who had been thoughtfully eating about a certain white-haired man with red eyes stood still and shook her head firmly at Tiona's words, for a moment she even seemed scared. Tiona. Ah, I see, you must overcome that fear of water, sighing, imagine that Argonaut-kun invites you to swim and sees you afraid of water, he will be disappointed, smiling. Ace looked at her for a few seconds before shaking her head confidently. Ace. No, he would help me swim and stay by my side to take care of me, looking at his plate of food in silence, yes, that's what he would do. Ace said that with complete certainty, I don't even doubt that she could be wrong, because she was completely sure that that's what Belle would do. After saying that, he went back to eating calmly, without noticing the fixed gazes of both Amazon sisters who seemed to smile mischievously. Tiona. Oh, by the way, what happened to Loki and Lafia? They looked dejected and even looked like walking corpses, curious. Ace. Thoughtfully, they argued about something with Riveria and they also got like that when I put on Belle's jacket, I don't know why, calmly. Ace gave a simple answer and went back to eating calmly, as if bringing the jacket of a boy you were interested in was nothing to be surprised about. Although obviously that was not something that both Amazon sisters would let go. Tiona. Oh, so you're wearing Argonaut-kun's jacket, huh? Now it makes sense why Loki and Lafia's faces were in shock, smiling amusedly. Hein. Surely, did he give you his jacket? Curious. Ace. No, denying, I forgot it on the island and thought about returning it to her, it didn't fit in my suitcases, so I put it on top of me. Tiona. And did you smell it? Smiling. Tiona. Ace. Looking at her in silence. Tiona. What? Isn't it normal for a girl to sniff a guy's jacket or sweatshirt when he lends it to her? Looking at them. Hein. A lady would never do this. Tiona. You do it, looking at her innocently. Hein. But certainly if it's from the boy you like, it's not something strange, it's completely normal to remember him or imagine him hugging you while you smell his jacket, nodding confidently. Ace. Smell. I haven't done that with Belle's jacket, thoughtfully. Tiona. You can do it, although it would be better if it is something you keep a secret, smiling. Ace. I understand, thoughtful. Tiona and Tian looked at each other, apparently they had easily convinced her. Aiz stood up from her seat, drawing the attention of both sisters, who looked at their empty plates in surprise. Aiz. I'll go get my armor, expressionless. Aiz left her dishes and quickly went through the halls towards her room under the gaze of Tiona and Tiona, who looked at her with curiosity. Tiona. She's going to smell his jacket, going back to eating. Tiona. Completely quiet. End. Annoying Goddesses 04. Aiz Waldstein, a fierce and determined adventurer who many years ago had become known for being a fierce fighter against monsters, being well known for her brutal and unhinged way in which she kills monsters, as if it were nothing. For an adventurer like her, you would never think that she wouldn't like a mission where she had to kill monsters, on the contrary, those were the kind of missions that one would believe the princess would like. But sometimes a person had more important things to do than just kill monsters, and when they were so eager to do that other thing and stopped you, it could bother that person a little, who would initially accept that mission if they had no other business. And well, that was the case with Aiz. She was walking through the corridors of the 16th floor of the dungeon with firm steps while holding her sword tightly and killing left and right every monster that appeared with complete indifference. She was frowning, she was upset. And for her companions, two Amazon sisters who were close to her, it was obvious why her attitude was like this. Tiona. She looks very upset, walking behind Aiz. Tiona. That's right, but that's better than disobeying our captain's orders, walking. Tiona. Tiona walked boredly behind Aiz, watching her kill a small group of monsters that were just spawning. She definitely needed to release some anger, so they would leave the cleaning to her to release that accumulated anger. He couldn't blame her, they had seen how excited she was about going to the fireplace mansion, the seat of the Hesta family, to talk to Belle. Since she saw her leave her room after most likely sniffing Belle's jacket a little, she seemed determined to go talk to him. Unfortunately, a lower-ranking member appeared with orders from the captain that they had a mission in the dungeon that he wanted the three of them to take care of, and it was not an option, it was a mandatory mission. Tiona and Tiona had to stop Aiz from doing nothing against a poor guy who had only come to give them the message. They were sure that she had left the boy traumatized by the death glare she gave him, but anyway, in the end they dragged her to the dungeon. Wow, they never thought of doing that, they had always thought that one day they would have to drag Aiz back home because she didn't want to leave the dungeon, but dragging her to the dungeon was something they never imagined they would do. It was certainly strange to see Aiz upset about having to kill monsters. But it was a mandatory mission, so they had to do it. Apparently a group of adventurers from their own family had been trapped on the 18th floor with no money or resources to return. They were level 2 and one level 3. They went on a reconnaissance mission to a possible new area. The new area wasn't very deep in the dungeon, so it was enough to send them to levels 2 and 3, but apparently they had a lot of setbacks with monsters, and in the end they spent all their money on extremely expensive potions and sending a letter that took almost 2 weeks to reach the surface. So here they were. Tiona walked calmly behind Aiz until she saw the entrance to the 17th floor, where a floor boss, Goliath, was located. Tiona. Do you think, taking out her weapons? Tiona. Nah, keeping her erga, let him release his anger, it's not like that monster can hurt him, calm down. Both sisters looked at Aiz in front of them, her firm and annoying footsteps echoing throughout the hallway. Monsters no longer appeared, since being near the floor boss room the only monster that spawned was the. Once they went through the corridors until they reached the 17th floor, they looked at a beautiful wall that seemed to be made of a beautiful shiny crystal. Although that striking wall was a death trap to attract adventurers who didn't know what was behind it. As soon as they reached the 17th floor, everything seemed to go silent. Tiona and Tiona stepped back a little so as not to be a hindrance. For his part, Aiz held his sword firmly and pointed it at the large glass wall. Crash. Almost immediately the glass wall shattered completely and several of those fragments fell to the ground, colliding and raising a large cloud of dust. A huge brown arm pierced the wall with force and the three saw a giant humanoid body emerge from the glass, destroying the wall completely. Thank you. Aiz got into a fighting stance and raised her sword firmly as her eyes sharpened at the horrendous abomination before her. Aiz. Tempest Aerial. And with those words a powerful greenish wind appeared surrounding the swordswoman like a torrent of furious wind. Fireplace mansion. In the Hestia family home, Belle was lying silently on his bed while trying to ignore the sunlight entering through his curtains and illuminating the entire room. After an exquisite breakfast and dinner that Makoto had prepared, he had planned to go to the dungeon, it was the usual, and he also wanted to gather some money to give to the Loki family as an apology. By the words of his goddess, the only way Loki will listen to you when he's angry is with money, and he'll definitely be furious to know about the island, so he was gathering money as part of his apology. Oh, that's what he was supposed to be doing, because the others literally grabbed him and left him in his room as soon as he mentioned his idea. The only one who said anything to him was Hermes, who briefly explained that Naza had been here and healed him, and that she had recommended that he do nothing else for the rest of the day. Belle sighed lightly, remembering that, and sat on his bed. He couldn't just sit there doing nothing. He was very used to always being on the move and not sleeping until he was exhausted or it was night. Belle got up from his bed and went to his window, watching the sky in silence. Then he looked down and saw the courtyard of the mansion. There, outside at Welf's request, was a normal-sized forge perfectly equipped for a blacksmith. Yes, it is Welf's smithy. Belle. I need a gun. Mansion fireplace patio. In the courtyard of the fireplace mansion, Welf was walking calmly towards his freeg while carrying a couple of Damascus ingots with some effort. Welf placed the ingots on a small wooden table outside his workshop and wiped the sweat off his face with his hand before standing still, watching a paper airplane land on the table. Welf stood motionless, looking at the children's paper craft on his table and turned his gaze, searching for where it could have come from. Finally, his gaze focused on the second floor of the mansion fireplace, where he could see the open window of Belle's room and Belle himself looking out of the window while looking at him with a chibi face. Welf. Huh? Belle. Confused. Belle Chibi looked at him silently for a few seconds before signaling with her hands for him to come closer. Welf looked at him doubtfully before entering his workshop in silence. Belle didn't say anything either, he just stood there at the window watching patiently. After a minute, Welf came out of his truce carrying a folding ladder and walked to the wall and extended the ladder, sticking it to the wall and being as close as possible to the Belle window. Welf climbed the stairs to the limit and was just a little below the height of the window. Welf. What's going on? We're not supposed to disturb you while you're resting. Looking at him. Belle. Huh? Why? Confused. Welf. Hermes orders. He took his role seriously. Don't ask any more. What do you need? Curious. Belle. Ah, well, I wanted to ask you 2 favors, laughing nervously. Welf. Which ones? Curious. Belle. Well, could you make me a new knife, one that is very resistant, please, looking at it. Welf. A new knife. Sure, it's not much of a problem. I can use the large part of the minotaur horn you gave me to make a blade a little bigger than Ushiwakameru, but why? Belle. Welf. Don't tell me Ushiwakameru broke. Exalted. Belle. No. Welf. What a joy, sighing, I wouldn't like to think that it had such a mediocre level that it broke so quickly, and I consider it one of my best works. However, if it isn't that, then why? Belle. Well, here comes the second favor. I need you to keep this a secret. It's that I lost the hestia blade. Welf. Excuse me? See, could you repeat that, please? Trembling. Belle. I lost the hestia blade. Welf. In shock. Belle. Welf. Worried. Welf. A dagger of 200 million, losing color, a dagger that the same Hesta-sama did, blank. Welf lost all focus and dropped his weight back as he grabbed the ladder. Belle. Welf. Exalted. The ladder began to fall backwards, taking Welf with it. Belle reached out to grab the ladder, but he couldn't and Welf hit the ground, knocked out almost immediately. Belle stared at him in shock with his mouth open before stepping back from the window and slowly closing it silently. Belle turned around and walked silently to his bed, lying down on it and covering his body. Belle. Well, I'm very tired, I better go to sleep, closing his eyes. And Welf's fainted body lay in the courtyard for an hour. Mansion fireplace restroom. In the room where Belle had been treated before, they were all gathered again, sitting in the green armchairs completely in silence. Belle had been sent to rest and well, Hermes didn't let anyone blame her for that, so she would be there until lunchtime to see how he was. For now they had another topic of discussion apart from Belle. Well, both topics were related, but to the important thing. Aiz Waldstein. Everyone had told Hestia that the night before they had not been able to follow Belle to the dungeon because they had a surprise visit from a certain swordswoman. Naturally they were scared, anything could happen, and if she was angry or resentful about what happened, it would be the end of the Hestia familia. They had no chance against a level 6, and if the entire Loki familia appeared, then they could well consider themselves dead. Still, she apparently just showed up and asked a little about Belle. She wanted to see him. The intriguing thing was, why did she want to be alone with him and then kill him for what he did to her? Or could it be that she wants to force him to take responsibility for being his first time? Did the Loki family send her to take responsibility and join their family? Or did they send her to capture him? What if they want to torture him for what he did to him and take the opportunity to find out how he levels up so quickly? All the possibilities scared them because they were all possible. Being such a strong girl and with such an expressionless face, it was not easy to know what she was thinking or what she could think of doing. They could not tell with her doll-like face if she was angry, sad, hurt, happy or serene. So they couldn't know what she felt for Belle. Will she be angry about what he did? Will she feel sad about having relationships like that? Hurt? Could she be happy to be with Belle? Or will she not care? Will she act calm and just let Belle take responsibility? Everything was probable for them and in many ways problematic. They were in a very bad situation if the Loki family decided to retaliate or take advantage of the situation, such as demanding that Belle change families. They would do everything possible to help fix things, but they wouldn't let their captain be taken advantage of either. If they demanded a change of family just to take advantage of him, then even if they couldn't do much, they would put up a fight. On the other hand, if they demanded that he change his family to take responsibility and not to take advantage of him, then they would have no reason to incite a fight, they would have to let their captain go for his happiness. Of course they wouldn't let that happen so easily, they were a family and they would be united no matter what, even if Belle changed families, they would still be her friends and her first family. But they would preferably try to keep things as they are now with the small difference of solving what happened between Belle and Ace. Although now the question was, how to solve the Belle and Ace problem. Hestia. Well, looking up, what conclusion did you come to? Looking at everyone. I'm not in my right mind, but even if I were, it's not easy to come to a conclusion. Many things can happen, tired. Hestia. Rest a little. I don't know what you were doing passed out in the courtyard, but it seems you hit yourself pretty hard, looking at him. Why yes, nervous, I can't tell him about the Hestia blade, closing his eyes. Lily. If the Loki family hasn't found out, the princess may be hiding it. If she came to visit bellcranel last night, there are two possibilities. That she wants revenge and none of this comes to light, or that bellcranel takes responsibility, that would be it. Makoto. Maybe, but what if the Loki family finds out? Curious. Lily. In that case, if Waldstein came alone and the Loki family knows what happened, it means that they sent her, that makes things more problematic although it is almost the same, they may want Ace to take care of him, and that none of this comes to light, so as not to damage their reputation, on the contrary, to protect their reputation, they would force bellcranel to take full responsibility. They would take advantage of that to force bellcranel to change families, and with how guilty she feels about everything, it wouldn't be very difficult for them to achieve it, worried. Hestia. That leaves us in a bad position. It would be best if we also act before they take us by surprise, it would be. Hermes. We can't do anything reckless, it would be, or anything that would harm bellcranel or her relationship with the Sword Princess. If we can still solve things we have to be careful with what we do, looking at them. Hestia. You're right, then, thoughtful. Lily. Are we going to visit the Loki family? Sweating. Nah. Hestia. What if we spy on Aiz Waldstein? Lily. Spy. Lily thinks she'd find us out very easily. She's not a level 6 adventurer for nothing, seriously. Hestia. Yes, but it's the best way to find out if she's resentful about what happened on the island and to know if it's wise for her to meet Belle, looking at them. Makoto. It's risky, but that's how all good ideas are, thoughtful. Lily. No, not really, drop of sweat. Makoto. By the way, the trip to the island cost us quite a bit of money, although the god Mage helped us with the payment, we still need to pay our part and it's about 300,000 valis, looking at everyone. Hestia. Ugh, tired, and we can't go to the dungeon until bellcranel recovers, frustrated. Lily. Yes, thoughtful, wait, why? Confused. Hestia. Bellcranel is her main pillar in the dungeon, if he is not there it is very dangerous for them to go beyond the 12th floor, looking at her. Lily. It's not shouldering, we depend completely on bellcranel, he's our ultimate wildcard, without him it's even difficult to stay on the 11th floor, depressed. Silent. Makoto. Certainly without Belle next to us we lose a lot of support, well then let's go. Smiling. Hermes. But it will be very dangerous, worried. Makoto. Since when is going to the dungeon not dangerous? Besides, how are we supposed to stop being a hindrance to Belle if we are not able to fight on our own without him being with us? We need to get stronger to be able to accompany him, smiling. So let's go to the dungeon, as deep as we can and gather as much money as possible. Hey. Determined. Hestia. Wait, I can't go to the dungeon, thoughtful. Makoto. You have work. Smiling. Hestia. Ugh, disheartened. Dungeon floor 18. On the 18th floor of the dungeon, known by many as a safe floor, a huge place with great vegetation and a rare quality that was very advantageous for adventurers. It was called a safe zone because on that floor the dungeon could not spawn monsters of any kind. Although the black Goliath that appeared a few months ago technically proved that there can be exceptions, although it is not normal now it is known that monsters can appear on the 18th floor, so now there was more security in the area, and also to the displeasure of many the sellers took advantage of the fact that the 18th floor could now be more dangerous and sold their products even more expensive than before because of the supposed danger of being there. This had upset countless adventurers who had no choice but to accept it reluctantly, not that much could be done to change things. Naturally, that price increase affected more than one person, and among those affected was a group belonging to the Loki family, which had only brought enough resources and money for the previous prices on the 18th floor. Loki family member. Ah, thank you so much for coming for us, we didn't know when our letter or the ransom would arrive, sighing. Member 2. Yes, we didn't think the prices would suddenly increase that much, we sold some of the items we got, and only then were we able to get enough to send the letter, sighing. Member 4. We were desperate, we ran out of money, and our resources were exhausted just yesterday, walking. Tiona. I understand, thoughtful, well, I suppose you got the data from the new area, right? Curious. Member 3. Yes, it is an amazing area full of hot water, it is very good for taking a bath, although we were confident and water monsters ambushed us walking, we thought it would be a safe area because of the lack of monsters, and it is, but further back there is a place that connects with all the hot water ponds, only there do monsters spawn, sighing. Member 4. Believe it or not, they are not aggressive, but they are very territorial, ponds are their habitat, and they don't mind you entering them, just that you stay there for a long time, thoughtful. Tiona. Oh. A new species. Excited. Member 1. We believe so, there are no records of similar monsters or an area like that, proud. Tiona. It means that the guild can reward us very well for information about a new area and a new species, quite an efficient data collection group. The 4 adventurers smiled proudly at the words, it was true, the guild rewarded very well for new and interesting information about the dungeon, so they had a great profit, even millions, assured. Member 2. By the way, Tiona-sama, looking at them, it's not my business or anything like that, but is something wrong with Aiz-sama? Tiona. Why do you ask? Member 2. Well, since she arrived she seemed quite irritated, and although I knew she is quite distant this time, she seemed to be a little more cold, if you know what I mean, looking at them. Tiona. More sharp, closing her eyes. Member 1. Yes. Did something happen to you on the way here? We're sorry if we were a boring task for you. We didn't think the captain would send 3 executives of your level to pick us up for our mistake, looking at them sadly. Tiona. Don't worry, smiling, although it's certainly not a good idea for them to approach Aiz, she's not in a great mood today, nervous. Tiona. You better hurry up and pack, I don't think Aiz will be waiting much longer, crossing his arms. Member 3. We'll keep that in mind, thank you, bowing. The 4 adventurers took their things and began to pack quickly, slightly nervously ignoring Aiz's cold gaze. She watched him silently, leaning her body against a tree. Her patience was not going to last much longer and they knew it. Aiz. I want to hug Belle, impatiently. The princess had priorities and they were being prevented from being fulfilled to her annoyance, although she was not the only one upset about this. Twilight Mansion. In the Twilight Mansion, headquarters of the Loki family, there was a tall jade-haired elfinoid, looking seriously at a blonde-haired Palom who looked at her calmly, sitting behind a desk. Riveria. Why did you send her? Finn, would be. Finn. What's wrong with him? He likes spending hours in the dungeon killing monsters. I don't see what's wrong with sending him on a mission where he can do that while escorting important information. Relax. Riveria. Don't come to me with that, it's true that the reward is a lot, but it wasn't such an important mission to send a level 6 and 2 level 5, at most a level 4 would be enough, it would be. Finn. Still, what's wrong with it? It was a good mission for her, right? She likes to get strong, and that way I can completely make sure the information reaches our hands, what better protection than a level 6, and I sent Tiona and Tian more than anything so it wouldn't get out of control, her strength is undeniable, but she's not the best at following orders. Tiona and Tian are there to prevent that, closing her eyes, without the maze, would most likely abandon the reconnaissance group to kill monsters, believing they would be fine if she left them for a few minutes, sighing. Riveria. What if she had more important things to do? It would be. Finn. What do you mean? Squinting. Riveria. Going out with someone. Finn raised his eyebrow curiously and looked at Riveria silently, each maintaining their own expression. Finally, after a few seconds, Finn spoke. Finn. Whatever it is, there's nothing that can be done. I already sent her on the mission, and they shouldn't take long to return, at most half a day, crossing his arms. Riveria sighed annoyed and left Finn's office in silence under his gaze, who remained silent for a few seconds, before turning to look at a mirror in his office. Finn. Satisfied. Curious. Yeah. As if it were a door, the mirror opened revealing a small secret hole the size of a person, perfect for hiding, and indeed, inside was a red-haired woman with her eyes closed, who calmly came out of hiding showing a smile. Finn. I don't understand what the purpose of this is, closing his eyes. Loki. Oh, and you don't have to know, it's personal, smiling. Finn. Remember our deal, looking at her seriously. Loki. Yes, yes, I promise you that this will not affect the Loki family or anything that worries you, relax now, looking at him, even so I will not tell you anything about what I want, smiling. Finn. That intrigues me more, sighing. Loki. Well you see, I had a nightmare, a horrible nightmare, and since then I hate rabbits, smiling darkly, and I don't want a rabbit to get near my pretty princess, so as much as it hurts me, I will keep our deal as long as you are not together, smiling, so, you do your thing, and I'll do mine, smiling. Finn. A rabbit and a princess, no need to think too much, I understand everything, calmly, very well, you will be very useful to me as an assistant, crossing his arms. Loki. I know it's true, now I'll go get something to drink, make sure you give more missions to my Aiz-chan when I get back, leaving. Finn. Hey where do you think you're going? Looking at her. Loki. Huh. Looking at him with a stupid face. Finn. Yes, our deal starts now, so grab a chair and drag it to my desk, because I have a lot of paperwork I need you to review, staring at her, or is the deal off? Staring at her. Loki ugh, annoyed. Loki took a chair and sat in front of Finn's desk, throwing a tantrum, although this didn't stop Finn from giving him a pen, and they started reviewing and signing papers for a few long hours. Loki had already signed the first paper, and his hand was already tired, yes, it would be a hard day. For the table. For Loki. Fireplace mansion. It was already late at night. The sky was getting dark, and at the entrance of the mansion chimney were all the members of the family except for the captain, all walking exhausted and with dirty and torn clothes, in addition to some minor wounds that would heal easily with some bandage. Even so, they all had looks full of determination and pride, because each one carried a leather bag of a more than notable size, in which the sound of coins colliding with each other resonated, so they had obtained a very good loot. Between all of them, about 210,000 valis, they had worked hard and had even made use of one of Welf's magic swords, and they already had more than half the money to pay for the ship, so they were quite encouraged and happy, just as Hesta said, passing the 12th floor was dangerous without Belle. But they managed as best they could, going up to the 14th floor. A pretty good feat in their opinion, they hadn't even realized how weak they were without Belle, since he was always the one who took care of most of them, they were more his support as a whole than his companions, and that wasn't something they were proud of. As the Hestia family entered through the metal fence gate, a familiar voice caught their attention and quickly paralyzed them. Can I see Belle? They immediately turned around and indeed, there was a girl with unmistakable golden hair and eyes, her long hair swayed in the cold wind of the evening, and her eyes seemed to shine in the moonlight. She stared at them all waiting for a response from the paralyzed members of the Hestia family. Thinking that they didn't hear her question, she repeated it a second time, eager to see a certain white-haired boy. Aiz. Can I see Belle? Looking at them. This time the others came out of their shock a little to give an answer, they did not want to provoke the anger of the level 6 swordswoman. Lily BBBB. Well, the truth is that Belle-sama hurt herself a little in the dungeon last night, so she's recovering from some injuries and is resting so nervous. Aiz. Did he hurt himself? Aiz's gaze quickly changed, her eyes filled with concern, and the anxiety she had to see Belle only grew more. Aiz. I'll go see him, entering. Welf. Ah. Wait. Waving his hands, our doctor said he needed rest, so he must be sleeping or resting right now, and we shouldn't disturb him, nervous. Pareja. You can come another day, Miss Wallenstein, we need to let Belle-sama rest so she can recover properly, you understand that her health is important, right? Sweating. Makoto. Yes, if you like, you can come warm up a bit and have some tea before returning to your headquarters. Belle-sama would surely offer you the same, nodding confidently. Aiz. I understand, it's okay, I won't talk to him. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, but the relief quickly went away. Aiz. So I'll just watch it, walking. Aiz walked with firm steps towards the mansion and was quickly stopped by all those who wanted to prevent her from passing, but stopping a level 6 was not an easy task. And they were literally pushed aside without her having to do anything and without stopping. Aiz continued walking, ignoring the black-haired girl in front of her, trying to stop her by planting her feet on the ground, but she only dragged the earth next to her as she couldn't stop Aiz from walking. Welf. We have to insist that she doesn't see him. Please. Pulling her by the arm. Lily. Stop walking. Lily's arms can't hold up. Grabbing her by the waist. Pareja. Please. Pareja's face turned red from all the effort she was making to try to stop Aiz, being level 1, and without surprising strength, she was the one who was making the most effort to stop her. She didn't want him to see Belle, she didn't know if he was awake or not, and she wouldn't know what would happen once they saw each other, she wouldn't know what would happen, and they weren't sure how Aiz would react, so they decided to stop her and wait to have a minimal idea of what could happen. Although technically they couldn't stop her. Just as Aiz was reaching the wooden doors of the mansion, a second voice was heard behind everyone, who turned around in surprise, seeing a Palom with blonde hair and blue eyes at the entrance of the mansion's courtyard walking towards them with a smile on his face. Naturally, everyone stood still and in shock to see him there. It was really a surprise to see him suddenly appear. Even for Aiz it was a surprise. In the end, he was a meter away from all of them and stopped looking at them with apparent tranquility. Finn. Aiz, you can't force your way into a home, especially a family's home, looking at her. Aiz looked at him silently and turned to look at him with a little more seriousness. Aiz. I wanted to see Belle, I'm his teacher, I have to see that he's okay, looking at him. Finn. They said he was resting, right? Aiz. I couldn't see him all day because of the mission, annoyed. Finn. You'll have to wait another day to see him, you can't break into his headquarters and you have to let him rest, let's go. This time Finn's tone was no longer so soft and kind, but more serious and authoritarian. He was giving Aiz an order, and she knew it. There was no room for reply, he was being ordered. Still, she didn't want to leave without seeing her rabbit. Aiz stood silently, staring at Finn and vice versa. Standing a few meters away from them were all the other members of the Hestia family, watching the scene in silence, each with different thoughts, but without intervening in the slightest. This was no longer their business, and they knew they shouldn't interfere. Aiz. I need to see it. This time the princess no longer had that serious and annoying tone, but one of sadness and longing. She looked like a little girl, losing an argument with her father over something she really wanted and was denied. Finn noticed that clearly and couldn't help but raise an eyebrow in curiosity, watching that imposing and indomitable swordswoman who always remained expressionless, acting like a little girl who wanted to throw a tantrum. Still, he was not up for objections. Firm in his figure and authority, Finn was completely serious and serene in the face of Aiz's attitude, and in accordance with his figure, he also acted like this. Finn. Aiz, we have to go, seriously, let's go. Finn stood firm in his decision, and from his tone, it seemed he would not accept no for an answer and would not tolerate another denial. Aiz lowered her head slightly, seeing Finn's firm stance. If he continued to refuse, she would do it by force, and she really didn't want to cause a big commotion as to wake Belle, who was resting. So with her head down in a defeated posture, she walked towards the exit of the mansion's courtyard in silence under the gaze of everyone. She passed by Finn without saying anything, nor did she turn to look at him. Finn knew she was not in the best mood with him. Seeing Aiz leave the mansion in the direction of the Loki family headquarters, Finn nodded pleased and turned to look at the others, who remained silent, watching with interest. Finn. I'm sorry for interrupting tonight, it's a pleasure to see you, Hestia family. Bowing slightly, I'm leaving. Just as he said, the captain of the Loki family silently withdrew from the fireplace mansion, leaving its members in silence, who were still wondering what the hell had happened. And after a minute in shock, Welf decided to speak. Welf. Hey, very impressive and all, but I'm already cold, let's go into the mansion. Cold. Lily? Cold. That's the least of it. Lily had forgotten she's exhausted. Let's go inside already. Tired. Makoto. Has Hestia Dono returned from work yet? Curious. Paraham. Let's go in and see, opening the door. Paraham opened the door and let everyone in before walking in and closing it. Already inside the fireplace mansion and with a little less cold, everyone went to the living room where they spent most of their time, and in fact, there they saw Hestia sitting on the armchair with her back to them in complete silence. Welf. We're here. How was the work, Hestia-sama? Did you get to see Hephaestus-sama? He looked as resplendent as ever, didn't he? Giggles. Hestia. What were you doing? Everyone. Huh. Confused. Hestia. What were Wallenstein and the captain of the Loki family doing here? Turning to look at them. When Hestia turned to look at them, they were slightly excited to see how she looked at them with empty eyes full of fear, expecting the worst, like a declaration of war or a death notice. Hestia. They're not going to declare war on us, right? Trembling, what if they suddenly appear while we're sleeping and throw rock bombs at us? Oh, they could use their strongest mage and cover the entire fireplace mansion in fire or ice. Trembling, this could be our last night and we haven't done anything to help Belle yet. Fearful, we're going to die. Scared. Everyone else watched with a drop in their head the scared attitude of their goddess, but they understood her. The truth is, they would have acted the same if they saw those who had the most there in their house late at night. And in the end, they had to explain everything they saw and calm their hysterical goddess down. End. Living Surprise 05. Fireplace Mansion. It was early morning. The sunlight was already rising. And at the headquarters of the Hestia family, all the members were gathered in front of the doors of the mansion while adjusting their armor and luggage. The sun was just rising from the right of the mansion, and because of the position they were in, the shadow enveloped them, preventing the light from reaching them. Hestia, who was in front of everyone, watched him get ready seriously before turning her gaze with concern, seeing behind her a person a little further away from the mansion. Belle was a little away from everyone else, being the only one who calmly received the sunlight, letting it envelop him and warm him a little before leaving for a place where no natural light reached. Belle raised his hands and adjusted a pair of metallic gloves slightly wider than his armor and a slightly duller color that reached to his elbow. Belle finished adjusting his gloves and turned around calmly, seeing all his other family behind him finishing getting ready. Belle walking. Belle approached his family and took a green potion that Lily handed him and kept it like everyone else. Already prepared, Belle walked to the exit of the mansion, being followed by the other members of his family. They were already slightly used to it. It was the same routine they had been following during this week. Hestia watched them leave in the distance as she waved goodbye before sighing tiredly. It had been the same for 7 days. And they still hadn't solved the issue of Loki's family, although after a week had passed she was pretty sure that the Sword Princess hadn't told her anything about what had happened to Loki's family. Even so, it had also been a problem for them not being able to find Aiz. Their plan was to follow her before Belle decided to talk to her, but to their bad luck for some reason lately the Princess of the Sword was never available. She was always on a special mission from the Loki family. Several of those missions were deep in the dungeon, so trying to follow her was almost suicide. That also prevented Belle from meeting Aiz. He himself had tried to look for her after gathering the necessary courage and a little money. That saddened Belle a little, but she accepted it and did her part to motivate herself, saying that until she has the opportunity to meet with Aiz, she will continue raising money and also thinking about what she is going to say, because the first time she looked for her to talk to her, it was without really thinking or planning anything. That reminded Hestia that somehow Belle's ability had also received a great bonus for his determination. This week the amount of exilia I had gathered had been industrial to say the least. At this rate I could level up in half the time I should or much less. Not to mention that fighting without weapons had made him improve rapidly when it came to fighting. Since a week ago Welf had given her those metal gloves, none of them could help but look at Welf like an idiot at that moment. Since Belle didn't use combat gloves, what a surprise it was to see him take them and start fighting with them. Not only that, but he rapidly improved his fighting skills, especially his agility and strength. Although the reasons why he used them were secret between Welf and Belle apparently. Hestia. Lately the whole situation is more confusing than before, sighing. Hestia closed the fireplace mansion and headed towards the Tower of Babel in her saleswoman's attire. She must have been working too. Twilight Mansion. In the home and seat of the Loki family were a certain emerald-haired and golden-haired mother and daughter arguing. Aiz. This is absurd. They've been giving me non-stop missions all week and they haven't let me go to the Hestia Familia headquarters at any time, even though I finished the missions quickly. Why? Angry. Riveria. I don't know what's going on in Finn's head with this. I already told him that it's exhausting for you too, but he keeps ignoring me, rubbing his temple. Aiz. I won't do today's mission, I'll go see Belle, it would be. Riveria. Wait, looking at her, forgive me for asking this too, but today's is urgent, I need you to do it, it's an urgent order from the guild that we can't ignore, seriously. Aiz. No, I said I'll go see Belle, annoyed. Riveria. Please just one more mission and that's it, I'll make sure that Finn takes those missions off your hands permanently, you'll be able to see Belle whenever you want, but please just do this mission, and that's it, looking at her. Aiz. If they still can't let me see Belle after this mission then I'm leaving the family, it would be. Riveria Aiz. Aiz. You once said that you won't let others stop me from being happy, if they don't let me see Belle then I'm leaving, serious. Riveria. I understand, smiling softly, okay, I'll accept your decision if that happens, looking at her softly. Aiz. I'll go enlist, leaving. As Aiz walked away, she was seen by Riveria who looked at her back in silence, unable to help but see next to Aiz a small version of her with scale armor and a completely blue dress, while looking at everyone aggressively and expressionlessly. Aiz, 10 years old. I already told you I'm fine, blank stare. Riveria. How is that okay? You're covered in wounds and bleeding. Worried, damn, I told Finn it was a bad idea to let you go to the middle floors alone, worriedly cleaning her wounds. Aiz. It's okay, it's to make me strong, clenching his fists. Riveria. That's not the way to get strong, Aiz. Aiz. I don't care, even if others use me, even if I'm unhappy, I need that power, I need to be able to kill that monster, darkening his gaze with rage. Riveria looked worriedly at Aiz before catching her as she saw how she let her body fall towards her. Riveria. Oh. Worried. Riveria shook Aiz, but he didn't wake up, he had fainted from exhaustion. Riveria. Silly girl, carrying her. Riveria looked at Aiz silently before smiling slightly. Riveria. How quickly time flies, smiling slightly. Riveria also turned around to go to the other side where Finn's office was, but before heading to the office, she was startled by the sound of someone collapsing on the floor behind her. He turned around quickly and was excited to see Aiz collapsed in the middle of the hallway unconscious. Riveria. Aiz. Worried. Riveria ran to Aiz and sat down next to her, checking her with concern, not knowing why she collapsed so suddenly. Riveria. Aiz, rubbing his face. Aiz. Unconscious. Dungeon floor 15. Punch punch punch. The bodies of 3 minotaurs fell inert to the ground with force, cracking the stone floor before disappearing into dust, leaving a magic stone lying on the ground. In front of them stood Belle, silently looking at the magic stones with his gloves slightly stained with blood next to his clothes and other armor. Belle looked at the magic stones in silence before suddenly raising his hand and stopping the blow of a 4th minotaur without flinching. Brah. Belle slowly squeezed the minotaur's hand, who grunted in pain, feeling his hand being mercilessly destroyed by the adventurer in front of him. The furious and desperate minotaur raised his other fist and brought it down hard on Belle's face to kill him, but before the blow reached him, the monster vanished into dust, dropping his magic stone to the ground. Belle turned his gaze to the left, seeing Mikoto holding her katana firmly where the minotaur's chest had previously been. Belle. Thank you, Mikoto, lowering her hand. Mikoto. You're welcome, Belle Dono. I love coming to these floors and facing minotaurs, they are the strongest rivals I can face on equal terms as a level 2, smiling confidently, and they give quite a bit of exelia, don't you think? Belle. Yes, that's true, turning around, do you think you can still fight? Looking at his tired teammates. Welf. Old man, the resistance of a level 3 is amazing, breathing tiredly, but yes, I assure you that I can still continue for much longer, smiling confidently. Haraham. I don't even do much, sighing dejectedly. Mikoto. You are vital to the Haraham Dono team, you are our hope against a situation we cannot control, smiling. Lily. I assure you that Lily can continue for a longer time, although we should go back for now, my bag is already full of magic stones, and I can't fill it with any more, seriously. Belle. What do you think if we go back to the surface to leave the magic stones and come back? Looking at them, if you're tired, that's fine. We can leave now. Welf. PFFFhaha, tell me you're joking, I love doing this, each time our resistance goes up more and more, as well as the speed with which we do this, 7 days ago we barely achieved half of this at the end of the day, and now we just did it in much less than half the time, smiling with pride. Mikoto. That's right. Our coordination and strength are much greater than before, and we're getting used to the intermediate floors, smiling proudly. Lily. They are the most excited about this, sighing with a smile. Haraham. I can still go on. Even if I'm the one who does the least, I'll support you in any way I can, motivated. Belle. Guys, okay, then let's leave the magic stones and then come back, turning around. All. Hi. And with that the Hestia Familia group began their journey back to the surface. Diansech Hospital. At the Diansech Family Hospital, Riveria and Ace were in consultation with the family captain, Hermes Tiesener, also known as the best healer in Arario. Riveria was sitting on a chair with concern while she watched Hermes inspect Ace, who was sitting on a stretcher expressionless following the instructions of Hermes, who checked that everything was okay. Hermes. Are you feeling ill in any way? Looking at her. Ace. No, shaking his head. Hermes. How strange, it is not common for a level 6 to collapse like that for no reason, although you do not seem to have anything serious, inspecting, you do not have superficial wounds, nor do you show signs of poisoning or any disease, thoughtful. Riveria. So what happened to him? Worried. Hermes. It's hard to tell if I'm just looking, please lie down on the table so I can check internally, looking at Ace. Ace nodded calmly and lay back on the stretcher as she watched Hermes run her hands over her body as they glowed softly. However, as soon as he lay down, he frowned slightly in disgust, feeling a little bad, wanting to. Hermes examined Ace seriously, she was a woman who took her job and the health of her patients very seriously, so no matter how small the wounds were, she always took her patients' wounds completely seriously, even a simple cut could have serious consequences. She started checking from the feet and continued upwards, examining, however she stopped abruptly when she ran her hand over Ace's stomach and looked into nothing with a surprised face. Hermes. WH. Before Hermes could finish speaking and Riveria could approach to ask what was happening, Ace abruptly got up from the stretcher, surprising both women, who saw her rush to the bathroom. Hermes and Riveria looked at each other without understanding and quickly followed Ace, worried that something had happened to her. However, Hermes already had a suspicion that this was happening. Upon entering the bathroom where Ace was, they saw the aforementioned cleaning her mouth with a bit of tissue while breathing heavily as if she were tired. Riveria. Ace, are you okay? Worried. Aiz turned to look at Riveria in silence, letting him see how exhausted she looked. Riveria. Did you throw up? Hermes. What's wrong with Aiz? Excited. Hermes quickly approached the golden-haired girl and placed her hand on Aiz's head, emitting a white glow. Hermes. Take a deep breath, this should calm your nausea, rubbing her back. Riveria. Are you okay? Worried. Hermes. I would have to inspect it again to verify my suspicions, although I am almost sure of what is happening, looking at Aiz. Aiz. What's wrong with me? Looking at her exhausted, am I sick? Hermes. Not exactly sick, walking. Hermes guided Aiz back onto the stretcher and gently placed her on the stretcher, trying to keep her hand on Aiz's head for a few seconds before moving it away and placing it on her stomach. Hermes again looked at her stomach with surprise, although this time she assimilated it better and continued inspecting Aiz's entire body looking for any other symptoms until she examined her entire body and separated her hands, allowing Aiz to sit down again. Hermes finished, looking at Riveria. Riveria. And what's wrong with him? Worried. Hermes. The good news is that she is not sick or infected with anything, in fact her health is quite good surprisingly considering her diet of Jag-Americans, staring at Aiz. Aiz looked away and Riveria shook his head before looking at Hermes. Riveria. And the bad one? Hermes. The bad news is that you'll have to stop going to the dungeon for a year or maybe more. What you'll have to stop doing just for this whole year is stop eating so many Jag-Americans, you'll need more nutritious things from now on, looking at her. Aiz looked at Hermes in shock, surprised by her words, although she didn't know what shocked her more, being forbidden to go to the dungeon or eat her precious crispy potatoes. Although thinking about it, maybe the dungeon thing would be beneficial, if he forbade him from going to the dungeon on the prescription of a doctor like Hermes, they would definitely not give him any more missions, that meant he would have time and an excuse to go see Belle. Although the Jag-Americans thing was unforgivable. Riveria. And why all this? Looking at her, you said I had nothing. Hermes. Yes, well, there is nothing dangerous that could harm your health, but those were my recommendations if you want the baby to be born healthy, writing in a notebook. Riveria. Huh. Build. In the guild, the Hestia Familia party was gathered exchanging their magic stones for culottes while their captain spoke with his advisor. Belle. Do you have any tips to help us with the middle floors? Curious. In front of Belle stood a half-elf with jaw-length brown hair and jade-green eyes with oval silver glasses, it was Aina Tull. Aina. Well, if at any time you are hungry or thirsty, try to look closely at the monsters in the surroundings. There are some areas where streams of water or bushes with fruits that seem edible appear, but not all of them are, some are toxic or poisonous and could end up killing you quickly, also the water, so if you see a stream of water or some fruit, hide and see if the monsters eat them. If the monster eats it, it means that it is not toxic. It could be very useful if you run out of supplies, smiling. Belle. I understand, thanks, I'll keep that in mind, nodding. Aina nodded pleased and watched Belle go with his group to exchange the last magic stones. Aina. How are you? Turning around. Aina turned her gaze and saw a brown-haired Palam approaching, silently looking at the white-haired man. Lily. She's improved. Going to the dungeon keeps her mind focused on this and makes her forget her other matters for a moment, sighing. And how are you doing? Looking at her. Aina. I've investigated, but I'm sorry to tell you that it's not possible to sue the god Hermes, looking at her, with any chance of winning, you'd have everything to lose, and even if you had the odds in your favor, the god Hermes is known for knowing how to collect favors, so he could put the trial in his favor, arranging some papers. Lily. TCH. Annoyed. Aina. I think they're done, you should go back, going. Lily sighed and returned to her family watching as Belle spoke to the receptionist, a human with pink hair and golden eyes named Misha. Belle. I would like to leave all the money in the Hestia family account, looking at her. Misha. At once, adventurer Sama. Smiling. Belle thanked the receptionist and walked away, joining his family and gathering his things to return to the dungeon. Twilight Mansion. Near the Loki family headquarters were two Amazon sisters walking back to the mansion, each with different reactions. Ain was completely serious and thoughtful as she processed what she had heard a few minutes ago. They had secretly followed Riveria to Danmachi hospital because they were worried about what was happening to Aiz. They had also heard that she fainted in the middle of the hallway and they were worried because being in first class was something very rare and usually meant that something dangerous happened to you. And they had secretly listened to the conversation they had had explaining what was happening to Aiz. Then they discovered that she was pregnant. Hermes is an experienced doctor and very serious in her work, they knew that she would never make jokes and it would be very difficult for her to be wrong, that's why when she said that a baby was living in her womb at this moment, they believed her. Then Hermes asked her who the father was, and after they realized that Aiz didn't know how babies were made, Riveria briefly explained to her how she could get pregnant, and Aiz seemed to understand quickly because she blushed slightly and immediately said who the father was. Hein. I still can't understand how could the white-haired boy get Aiz pregnant. I know she's a bit clumsy, but she would never do something like that with a stranger, no matter how much she doesn't know about the subject, so how besides, the captain has been overloading Aiz with missions all the time, preventing her from seeing the boy. Even so, how did she end up pregnant? Thoughtful. Unlike the gifted sister, the sister who was not as blessed as her twin was smiling amusedly beside her while laughing mischievously. Tiona. Isn't it obvious? It seems that Aiz had a very fun adventure with Argonaut Khan on that island. Fufu, laughing, I wonder if a level 3 was able to satisfy a level 6, smiling. Tiona. Oh well, it would certainly be impressive if he could, although that is not important, the important thing is Aiz's pregnancy, she is going to have a child with that man, surprised, wow, I still can't believe that what I just said is true, don't you think this could be just because of him? Tiona. I highly doubt that Argonaut Khan will force Aiz to do something like that, and it would be impossible for him to defeat a level 6, and if you still have doubts about that, remember that Aiz has been very anxious to see Belle again since the island, I don't think she would do that if Belle had abused her, looking at her. Hein. Well that's true, maybe I'm thinking too much, I should be happy about the news, maybe that way I can get away from the dungeon for good, smiling, even though I wouldn't put my son's life at risk for revenge, smiling. Tiona looked at the huge wooden door of the mansion in silence, they were right at the entrance, she had focused on her conversation and did not realize when they had arrived right at the Twilight Mansion. Tiona. Exactly. I wonder what she'd be like as a mother. Could I be her baby's godmother? Smiling imaginatively, what a great idea. Opening the door. Tiona. We'll discuss that later, for now let's try to keep it a secret, that's better, you know how Aiz's fans would be if they knew she was pregnant, or worse, who the father is, phew I can already imagine the face of that flea-bitten wolf when he heard the news, laughing slightly, although I'll have to hold back the urge until it's a good idea to reveal the news, for now let's try to hide it from our entire family. Before Tiona could finish speaking or even enter the mansion, she could hear her younger sister already inside the mansion and quite far into it while she was shouting at the top of her lungs that she would be the godmother of Aiz and Belle's baby. Tiona. Yes, I knew this wasn't a good idea, sighing. Tiona closed the mansion door and walked slowly, tired, already imagining the future wave of questions and comments from all the curious people who wanted to know more about the subject. Oh, he could already imagine the gossip and rumors that would spread throughout the entire Riveria soon. The princess of the Loki family, Aiz Waldstein, carries in her womb the baby of the future promise, the record holder and captain of the Hestia family, bellcranel. It would definitely be a very descriptive and accurate title. And with many problems guaranteed. Tiona. Since, walking. Dungeon. Oblivious to all the problems that were recently happening on the surface. The Hestia Familia party was currently standing right in front of a colossal human-shaped monster with brown skin and long brown hair, standing in front of a destroyed pearl crystal wall from where it had been born. The floor manager. Goliath. They would face this monster again, although now it would be just them, without the help of all the adventurers of Riveria. And this time a normal Goliath. Belle adjusted his metallic gloves and watched the enormous Rex monster in silence as his party prepared to fight. Belle. The Loki family took him out on a mini-expedition just over a week ago. Welf. Aha, holding his sword. Belle. And just today when we decided to go to the 18th floor, with a day to spare for it to regenerate, it decided to appear a day early, staring at the Goliath. Makoto. You're right, nodding. Pareja. We can go back if you want, Belle-sama, looking at him. Belle. Nah, we're used to this already, looking at the Goliath. Lily. You don't have to keep your words to yourself, Belle-sama, say them openly, we have shit luck, looking at the Goliath. Belle. You already said it for me, sighing, it doesn't matter, we already finished an irregular one, we can handle a normal one, so. The entire Hestia family looked at their captain with excitement, now more experienced, each one felt capable enough of a great feat. It was assumed that only a group of at least 5 level 3s could take down Goliath. And here they were, with only 1 level 3, 2 level 2 and 2 level 1, about to face that monster that would give problems to levels 4 or even 5. Belle. Then let's finish him off, serious. Yep, a normal day for the Hestia family. End. Plains, 06. Twilight Mansion. Everything was chaos at this moment. Family members running around spreading the news that Aiz would have a son in a matter of minutes. The information came as a huge shock to Twilight Mansion. Which was perfectly seen by a gifted Amazon who was sitting in a general rest area where she could see all the members of the family running around excitedly. Tiona sighed tiredly, seeing that she was not able to stop her sister in time from causing this. Speaking of Tiona. She was under Tiona, who kept her lying on the ground with her mouth covered while she watched all the chaos she caused. Tiona. Oops, he, laughing nervously. Tiona sighed, tired of her sister's recklessness, and got up from her, knowing that there was no point in preventing her from divulging more information. At this rate, everyone in the mansion would know in no time. Tiona. Now what? Curious. Tiona. Now what? Well, what else? Let's go before Loki or the captain arrive. I'm more than sure they'll find out that you were the one who started it all, so it's best to go before they start asking. I don't even want to imagine how Lafia and Bet will feel when they find out too. Leaving. See you later. Before Tiona could finish speaking, he stopped abruptly when he collided with the back of his sister, who had stopped abruptly, confusing him. Tiona. What's wrong? Curious. Tiona said absolutely nothing, which confused her sister, who stepped aside to see the same thing as her sister and was left blank when she saw her captain Finn Damon standing in front of them with his arms crossed next to Loki, who looked like he was about to explode at any moment. Finn. Before Loki goes all out and starts demanding I kick them out of the family, can you explain to me what happened and why there's a rumor circulating that Aiz is having a baby? Raising an eyebrow. Loki. That's not the most important thing. Why are they saying she's pregnant with that dwarf's child? Pointing at them angrily. Finn. Shout it if you want. Loki. Grunting. Finn. So, are you going to explain? Looking at Tiona and Tiona. 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 Breathing deeply. Tiona, it was her. It was me. Finn. Loki. Tiona. Hey. I thought you'd also say it was you who came to defend me. Pouting. Tiona. I had nothing to do with it. Tiona. It was your idea to spy on Aiz and Riveria when they went with Hermes. Excited. Tiona. Yes, but I told you to keep the fact that I was pregnant a secret. Excited. Tiona and Tiona began to argue under the gaze of Finn and Loki, who decided to put the information in order. Finn. Come on, calm down both of you, serious. Immediately Tiona stood up straight and stopped fighting with her sister, who, upon seeing her stop, also calmed down. Finn. Thanks, now explain in detail why they say that Aiz is pregnant with the child of the goddess Hestia, seriously. Tiona. Well, it's that Riveria took Aiz to the Danmachi hospital because she had fainted abruptly and we followed them because we were worried about Aiz. Tiona. Why after Hermes examined Aiz she vomited and well we heard Hermes tell her that she was expecting a baby. Loki. Shocked, impossible. She must be joking. Finn. Thoughtful, I doubt it, she takes her job very seriously, she wouldn't joke, much less with a topic like this, thoughtful. Loki. Impossible, in shock. Finn. Well, that brings me to the next question, how do you know she's pregnant with bellcranel's child? Staring at them. Tiona. Well, apparently Aiz didn't know how babies are made, laughing nervously. Finn. A carelessness, closing his eyes, but even so she knows what intimacy is and how important it is. It has been seen that bellcranel is important to her, but she would not agree to do any act that could be considered suspicious or strange like that, and he is noble. I don't know how to describe it, but he seems to be the type of person who would take advantage of a girl. Loki. Unless he forces her. Staring at Tiona. Tiona. Well, Tiona thought the same, but it's impossible, Argonaut Khan is too shy to take the initiative and Aiz doesn't seem to hate him or anything like that, besides it's almost impossible for him to be able to against a level 6, looking at them. Finn. Thoughtful, you said she fainted and threw up, right? Looking at her. Tiona. Yes, why? Finn. It's not something very common for adventurers to have that happen, it's only considered normal for pregnant adventurers or adventurers who suffer from incurable diseases. Thoughtful, a week ago she was normal, but she looks more tired than before, it could be because of the missions I give her, but even for a level 6, she looked more tired than she should, so I can guess that she's just started to show the symptoms of pregnancy. Thoughtful. Loki. What does that mean? Looking at him. Finn. The symptoms of pregnancy begin to appear after the first week of formation, so, looking at Loki. Loki. Looking at him expectantly. Finn. Sometimes you disappoint me more than you can imagine, sighing. Loki. Tiona. Oh, so that means Aiz got pregnant a little over a week ago, smiling. Finn. Exactly, nodding. Loki. Of course I already knew that, crossing his arms, wait, that's impossible. For a whole week I've forbidden them from seeing each other. Looking at Finn. Finn. Well, I said a little over a week, how did Belle and Aiz meet before the week you asked me not to put them together? Looking at her. Loki. Opening his eyes, they weren't nightmares, I was visualizing what I heard that night, holding his head in shock. Yawn. Wait. Tiona. Did she say before the week you asked me not to put them together? Looking at Finn. Finn. Looking at them, oh yeah, Loki said he had a horrible premonition and wanted to prevent Belle and Ace from getting together, so he asked me to monopolize her with missions so they wouldn't get together until he found another more viable request. Calm down. Ian. And why did you accept, Captain? Finn. Oh, in exchange he offered to help me with some paperwork. Ian. Just for that. I could have helped him with that and so much more. Finn. I don't need help with the paperwork, it's not that tedious once you get used to it and have your schedule set. I just wanted her to suffer since she's never done paperwork for expenses, contracts, rejections, etc., smiling with pleasure. Do you see her red hands? They're the result of hard work signing and sealing papers, right Loki? Loki. Both turned to look at their goddess and saw her being violently shaken by Tiona, who kept saying that it was her fault that Aiz was so excited lately. Well, at least I don't blame Finn, who calmly watched as she shook Loki. Finn. Well, I won't assume things about bellcranel, but that doesn't change the fact that Aiz is expecting his child, so Aiz's constant missions and her estrangement from Belle are over. Now it's an obligation for her to see Belle and give him the news. We'll see if he accepts the responsibility, if not, well we'll see, closing his eyes. Tiona. Huh? Stops shaking Loki, and what do we do if he takes responsibility? Finn. For obvious reasons it is better for parents to stay together and have a relationship, so he will marry Aiz, and since our family is better off financially, he will move to the Loki family and live in the Twilight Mansion, taking care of Aiz and the baby, smiling. Ian. Oh, that's why I accepted so easily, it benefits the family to have the big promise of Riveria, the record breaker in the family. Looking at him, well I'm not complaining, that way he will be happier, smiling. Tiona. Yes, that's true. But what about Argonaut-kun? I don't think he'll accept that so easily. He's fought hard together and for his family. I doubt he'll abandon her just like that, even if it's for his son. Or maybe he will, but first, I think he'll try to negotiate a way to stay in his family, thoughtful. Finn. It will be useless, and he has nothing to lose, besides we have everything necessary to care for and educate a baby properly in the Twilight Mansion. We just have to keep Loki away or have him stay in hotels during his first years, and the baby will live safely, pleased. Loki. Hey. It's my mansion first. Finn. It was your fault that Aiz was so upset lately, you proposed the missions after all. As soon as Tiona remembered that, she grabbed Loki again and shook her, repeating that it was her fault. The poor board could only complain while it was shaken, it could not against the strength of a first-class Amazon, but it could look at Finn as if he were a traitor. It knew that he had said all that, so that they would blame her and not him. For him there was never any risk, he only enjoyed her suffering. If she were not in this situation, maybe she would feel proud, maybe. Loki Xnianxnadwajwood Wibfi, Marita. Streets of Riveria. Walking silently through the streets of Riveria were Riveria and Ace. Curiously, both had big smiles on their faces, which confused and interested the people around them, who wanted to know the reason why the serene vice captain and the expressionless sword princess of the Loki family looked so happy. Her happiness was simple. Riveria was happy for her daughter, knowing how Belle was she highly doubted that she would reject her responsibility, and although she was a little embarrassed to think that Belle and Aiz had done adult things, that did not take away her happiness that her daughter would be a mother and form a family. She was also happy because of Aiz's face, she could tell perfectly. She was also happy to start a family with Belle, and that made Riveria happy. Aiz was the one who was most overflowing with happiness. After they explained to her in more detail what having a baby entails, she couldn't be happier. She would get engaged to Belle, which in turn meant that they would always be together as a married couple, so even if her family wanted to, they wouldn't separate her from him. In addition, she would have a child of hers and Belle's. He had never had thoughts about his future, but now he couldn't stop having them. Imagining herself and Belle like her parents when she was little made her soul happy, and imagining a little me who would be her baby couldn't make her happier. What would she be like? That was what she wondered most. Would she be just like her? Blonde, with golden eyes. She would love to see a little version of her laughing and jumping around without a care in the world, who would take advantage of her youth unlike her, who gave herself over to hatred and revenge. Although he would like her to be like Belle, it was not because he had preferences, but he would love her to have that peculiar white hair and those beautifying ruby eyes, in which he had lost himself in his mind more than once imagining them. That beautiful, shy smile and that desire to help people no matter what, just like Belle. Yes, it would definitely be beautiful to have a baby like that. What would she name him? Would she name him Belle? Even she didn't have that little imagination, well, more or less, but she would like to pay homage to her parents if Belle agreed and name him Ari or Albert, depending on whether it's a boy or a girl, although she would also accept suggestions from Belle. Obviously, he would be the father. Aiz couldn't be happier while imagining her future life. In her mind there were no traces of negative thoughts or revenge, she was simply thinking about her family and their well-being. She already knew it, she had abandoned her revenge quickly, something surprising, she had dedicated a large part of her life to becoming strong and taking revenge, but now she had let go of her revenge so easily that she even made it seem like something unimportant, maybe that was it, something unimportant. Aiz. How are we going to get married? Looking at her. Riveria ho, laughing, I was hoping you'd ask that since I mentioned the engagement, you see, it's a tedious process, but the result is beautiful, and it will be one of the moments you will remember most fondly in your life. Belle will be delighted at the wedding seeing you in a wedding dress, I'm sure, happy. And with that the conversation between Aiz and Riveria continued, almost completely planning a wedding between Aiz, Belle and the future baby. Riveria. By the way, you're getting married after giving birth, looking at her. Aiz. Confused. Riveria. One day I'll explain it to you, walking. Aiz. Okay, following her. Dungeon. Crash. A huge fist hit the stone floor and shattered it, sending hundreds of pieces of broken stones flying, which were quickly dodged by figures even smaller than the fist. The Hestia family was surrounding the enormous Rex monster, dodging and retreating slightly from the rain of projectiles caused by that powerful blow to the ground. Makoto. Use Goliath's cloaks. Excited. Makoto hugged Hermes and covered herself with Goliath's cloak, receiving the projectiles without problems. Lily saw Welf near her and jumped next to him who covered them both with the cloak just like Makoto receiving the attack without getting hurt. The black Goliath skin was very resistant, there was no doubt about it, and it was a very good shock absorber, despite being a fabric, when it received an impact it seemed to turn into a hard mass and absorbed all the blow. Lily. And bellcranel. Worried. Crash. Belle ran swiftly around the Goliath, nimbly dodging projectiles as he approached the monster. Goliath fixed him with his gaze, even though he was a monster with low reasoning, he could notice that he was the biggest threat. Or at least the most skilled one, and with that he hit the ground again, tearing off large pieces of stone and exploding them with his strength, shooting the fragments in all directions with great speed, repeating the same attack as before. Welf and Makoto covered themselves again with Goliath's cloaks, receiving the impact without problems, but Belle, being so close, had no chance to dodge or cover himself, so he had no choice but to receive the attack. Although I wasn't going to receive it fully either. He struck one of the larger fragments of stone that were hurtling towards him at high speed, easily pulverizing it before gathering his arms in front of him and receiving the impact of other smaller fragments with force. Once he saw the opportunity to continue attacking, seeing the fragment attack almost over, he approached the Goliath running again, while he heard the footsteps of Welf running behind him and saw Makoto surround the monster from behind. The monster growled angrily and with the last large rock in place, pulverized it in its hands before making a third attack, throwing the fragments at great speed. Welf and Belle were in range of the attack and couldn't dodge it. But none of them stopped running. Welf covered himself with Goliath's blanket as he ran and unsheathed a shining greenish and gold sword with a long but thin blade. Belle covered his face with his arms, receiving some of the fragments full on. Belle. The attack is less fast and powerful than before, I don't need to receive the attack fully if I can stop it, squinting. Belle clenched his fists and began to punch and smash the debris with ease, avoiding being hit. Once the rain of rock stopped, Belle looked at the Goliath seriously, while Welf removed Goliath's cloak from his field of vision, seeing Belle a few meters in front of him, nimbly dodge a punch from the Goliath that grazed the ground and raised dust. Belle ran up the Goliath's arm who looked at him growling before raising his arm and shaking it aggressively. Once he stopped he checked his arm again only to see Belle still attached to his arm while holding onto two long red knives with thin blades buried in his arm. Belle firebolt. As soon as Belle finished casting his magic, a large reddish flash came out of his hands, transferring itself towards the dull reddish blades which shone slightly inside before being covered in flames. Flames that pierced the Goliath's skin and traveled up his arm. Brah. Belle firebolt. Belle cast his magic several more times trying to bury the knives as deep as possible, it was necessary, or else the flames would not travel through his bloodstream far enough. It was fortunate to discover that the blood of most monsters was flammable, although it was somewhat difficult to make it combust but not impossible, and doing so inside their body would make the spread easier and harder to prevent. Goliath screamed in pain as he held his right arm tightly, feeling it slowly begin to swell. And he wasn't the only one who noticed it. Everyone else could see it too. Seconds after Belle cast his magic the monster's arm began to swell slightly, but at a constant rate, while a reddish glow seemed to emanate from inside it and travel throughout his arm. Belle pressed the blades hard, feeling how the pressure of the gas and other gases produced by the evaporated blood inside the Goliath's arm began to push his blades looking for a way out, which in turn produced intense pain and swelling in the monster's arm. As the Goliath shook violently and clutched his arm in pain, Belle glanced at Makoto out of the corner of his eye before bending his knees and leaping forcefully off the Goliath's arm, pulling his blades with him and zooming off into the air. The Goliath grunted in pain as a large jet of flaming blood shot out of the holes made by the blades, scattering his blood all over the place. His arm lost the swelling it had when all the gas and steam produced by the fire and his blood shot out at full force through his wounds, but that also harmed him when it also took his blood, causing him to lose it massively. The Goliath covered the wound with his hand trying to stop the bleeding in vain. He couldn't move that arm, he felt like he had lost sensitivity and mobility. It was understandable, the fire had burned his nervous system and many of his muscles from the inside, leaving the arm useless and charred from the inside. Although he couldn't move it, the pain was intense, but he couldn't stop and try to tear it off, not yet, he still had enemies attacking him. Belle. Now Makoto. Makoto, several meters away from the Goliath, seeing Belle move far enough away from the monster and stunning him from the great pain, finished conjuring her magic and summoned it right above the Goliath. He brought his hands together and separated his palms, leaving only the flames of his fingers together. A ball of a faint dark violet color appeared in the middle of his two palms, and immediately afterward, a huge bright purple magic circle appeared above the Goliath. From the magic circle came a blade of a huge sword and pierced it until it reached the ground. The sword didn't do any damage, but it didn't matter, that wasn't what it was for. As soon as the tip of the sword touched the ground, an enormous pressure was exerted on the Goliath, slightly distorting the figure of the monster, who felt as if a great force was pushing him down. The monster stood firm despite the pain in his right arm and turned his neck with difficulty, seeing the girl who had conjured the magic with hatred. Makoto looked back at him unfazed, there was no danger, she had done her part. The Goliath tried to get out of the attack zone of Makoto's magic, but as soon as he tried to move he felt himself staggering to the ground. He couldn't separate his legs, something was preventing him. Lily squeezed the steel wire that Welf had made tightly and turned her gaze, seeing out of the corner of her eye the Goliath's feet tied with several turns of the wire. She didn't have the strength to stop such a monster, but nature did. Lily firmly tied the other end of the wire to a large rock stuck in the ground that was there, thanks to the craters that Goliath himself had made with his stone attack. Steel wire wouldn't stop a big monster on its own, so it was tied with many turns around its legs. That way, with so many turns and being such a thin cable, if the Goliath made more pressure, in the end the cable would end up piercing his skin by its own force and without breaking. And that happened. The Goliath grunted in pain as he felt several of the wires dig into his skin, hindering his progress and forcing him to give in to Makoto's magic, falling to the ground fully. Still in the air, Belle was looking at the stage seriously, it was time to act, but as he pushed off with the Goliath, he was shot higher and was still falling. It would be a hard impact. Luckily, Goliath's skin layers were extremely reliable at cushioning blows. Belle looked at Hermes beside him, hugging him tightly while covering them both with Goliath's skin. Welf had thrown her into the air next to him so that she would use the cloak and cushion the blow. It worked pretty well. They fell sharply to the ground due to the speed, but quickly the cloak spread and Belle lifted Hermes gently without a scratch before running towards Welf, who knew what he had to do. Welf raised a green sword above his head while Belle, with a white glow in his right hand, extended it towards the Goliath. Belle firebolt. Welf oars. Launching a cut with his sword. From Belle's hand came a great torrent of fire that emanated a powerful sky blue glow inside. On the other hand, the sword released a great gust of wind that did not go towards the Goliath, but towards Belle's attack. The wind fueled the fire, turning that torrent into a great wave of fire that could cover the entire body of the Goliath. A devastating and powerful attack. Everyone stopped and watched the Goliath's body become completely covered in flames as he screamed and agonized in pain. Finally the screams stopped. Everyone watched expectantly in case the Goliath miraculously emerged from the fire to attack them. But it was not necessary. Well, a few seconds later a huge explosion of dust extinguished the flames and covered the entire place, slightly obstructing their fields of vision. Welf quickly swung his sword again, and a great gust of wind sucked up all the dust and dispersed it. In the place there was only the magic stone of the monster they had just killed and a few traces of flames that had managed to survive the explosion of the monster's body. Everyone smiled happily and excitedly. They had just killed a Goliath. That was not a feat a small family could boast about every day. It was a great achievement. Even for Belle, who smiled with excitement as his friends walked alongside him celebrating. Fireplace Mansion. The doors of the mansion swung open with force as two kicks hit them with excitement, revealing Welf and Makoto with their leg extended while smiling proudly carrying large sacks of money. Behind them, Lily sighed as she shook her head, on her back she carried a backpack full of money firmly, around the backpack she had tied the steel wire tightly and chains. It was Lily, and that was a lot of money to carry so unprotected. Belle and Hermes followed behind her calmly, both carrying bags a little smaller than the others. Hestia quickly arrived at the hallway, excited by the loud sound that came from the doors being slammed. Hestia. What the hell is wrong with them? Hestia couldn't even finish speaking when the huge bags of valises that all her family members had brought came into her range of vision. Hestia. A shock. Belle. We're back, Kami-sama, smiling sadly. Hestia. What is all this money? Surprised. Lily. That's what you get by killing monsters non-stop from the 14th to the 17th floor. Opening her backpack. Hestia. 17. But only Goliath appears there, looking at them. Makoto. Exactly. Running with the valise bag. Welf. Hahaha, I'm going to invest in more weapons. Running to his smithy. Lily. This is mine and mine alone. Did you hear that? Breathing aggressively. Lily quickly walked away carrying her backpack to her room while being watched by Belle, Hestia and Hermes. Hermes. I would like to leave it to you Hestia-sama, Belle-sama, extending it. Hestia. No need Hermes, it's your money, use it as you wish, smiling. Hermes looked at Hestia sadly and turned to look at Belle who looked at her calmly. Belle. It's yours, use it as you wish, smiling. Hermes. Well it's mine and I want to give it to you, extending it. He even sighed knowing that Hermes wasn't picky and wouldn't spend it on anything, but it still wasn't good for her to offer her earnings so easily. Hestia was about to reproach him again before looking in surprise at Belle's bare hand, calmly taking the bag of money. Belle. Okay, thank you very much Hermes, smiling. Hermes remained silent but smiled happily and nodded animatedly while her tail moved from side to side according to her mood. Hestia looked at Belle reproachfully but sighed, Hermes wasn't going to use it anyway and she would be happier if Belle used it and found it useful. Hestia. What does it matter, turning around, let's go to dinner, I ordered some food from the hostess, walking. Belle, following her. Hermes. I'll set the table immediately, following them. Hermes went ahead of both of them and walked quickly towards the dining room to do her job. She was not only a teammate but also like the family servant, so she had to be efficient in her work. Hestia followed her to bring the food leaving Belle alone with both bags of money. He headed to his room in silence and left both bags in a corner as if they were no big deal, then sat on his bed and tiredly left his metal gloves beside it. He looked at his bruised hands for a few seconds before turning his gaze towards the window, watching the moonlight softly illuminate his room. He had enjoyed his fight with the Goliath, it had worked quite well to distract himself and feel as if he had surpassed himself again. No matter how many times I did it, it was always a satisfying feeling. Although that didn't make him forget his other affairs forever. Belle. How's Aiz now? Looking out the window. Fireplace mansion. Completely oblivious to her surroundings was Aiz, who was sitting in the middle of a silver armchair with green cushions in a large room used for meetings between the family executives. It was generally used to have important meetings and talks about the family and some decisions to be made, or also to plan among the high command some future expedition. Although now they would use it for the first and something a little more personal. All the executives were gathered there. Tiona. Loga. Gareth Landrock. Reverial Joe's Alf. Vindime. And the goddess Loki. Everyone gathered around the sofa where Aiz was sitting, looking at them calmly with no apparent expression. Standing next to him was Riveria who had a hand on his shoulder with a serene look. Tiona and Tian smiled calmly, being the ones who had heard the news before, they were only here to give their opinion on the future of Aiz. Riveria was there to support her and plan for her future as well. Finn was in charge of that and of deciding what would happen in the future with the family, with bellcranel and with Aiz. Loki and Bette, they were here to look for answers, those responsible in punishments. Finn. I'll assume you already know the reason why we're here, looking at everyone. Before anyone could say anything, Bette had already spoken, calling for attention when he slammed his hands against the table without breaking it, surprisingly. Bette. No. I don't know why the buck we're here, so I'll ask. What the buck are these rumors about Aiz being pregnant with Tomato Boy? Angry. Finn sighed slightly and saw that reaction coming from Bette but decided to explain it calmly. Finn. That's what you heard Bette, a few hours ago Aiz and Riveria went together to the Danmachi hospital where they were treated by Hermes, who diagnosed that Aiz was pregnant, looking at him. Bette. I already knew that, damn it. Finn. What? Confused. Bette snorted in annoyance before straightening up and taking a deep breath to calm himself, but keeping his annoyed look. Bette. Her smell it's different, looking at Aiz, it's the same smell that women give off when they are pregnant, only less intense, looking at Finn. Finn. I see, you noticed through your sharp senses that beast man, looking at him, has been around for how long? Bette. 3 days. Finn. Ah, when I gave you the mission together with Aiz and Lafia, it makes sense, you had the opportunity to be close to her, understanding. That. Yes, 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 anyway, that doesn't matter anymore. What's this shit about Aiz being pregnant with Tomato Boy? Annoyed. Finn. I thought you'd know by the smell then, confused. That's the problem, I didn't detect her scent at all, I knew she was pregnant, but I didn't detect the scent of anyone who had been very close to her this whole week, looking at him. Everyone. Ah. Aiz. I haven't spoken to Belle this week, looking at Bet. So how? Riveria. We met the Hestia family on our trip to the uncharted island that was on Hermes' mission, looking at him. Bet. Son of a bitch. Aiz. I haven't spoken to him since then, expressive. Bet. Oh. Frowning, is it him? Finn. No, he doesn't even know about the baby, so it's too soon to say that he abandoned his responsibility, the reason why they haven't seen each other is because of Loki. Bet. What does the drunk table have to do with this? Finn. He asked me to monopolize Aiz with missions to prevent them from seeing each other, apparently Loki heard the efforts of Belle and Aiz to establish a bond between our families and took it as a premonition, so he wanted to prevent them from getting together so that wouldn't happen, although it wasn't a dream, laughing lightly. Loki holding his head. Bet growling. Tiona. I thought you would react worse, considering your attitude, laughing. Bet. Shut your bucking mouth, Amazon, turning around. And what are you going to do with Tomato Boy? Turning your back on them. Riveria. We think that the best option due to our family's position would be for her to move to our family and take care of the baby with Aiz. It would be better for the parents to be together and in the same family to be completely available to the baby and take care of him. Aiz nodded animatedly in affirmation of what Riveria said as they watched Bet expectantly, she hadn't reacted violently, and that was interesting. Bet. I see, looking at them, they are stupid, leaving. Bet left the cove and slammed the door without surprising anyone, it was something common for him, even so his words had taken them by surprise. Tiona. Well, I understand slightly what you mean, scratching the back of her neck. Aiz turned to look questioningly at Tiona who flinched slightly at the look knowing she wanted an answer. Tiona. Argonaut Khan has done a lot for his family, he loves them very much, and I don't doubt that he would do anything for his family, I also don't doubt that he would love Aiz and accept his responsibility as a father, but even for him, it would be difficult to leave his friends and family aside and join the show, as if nothing had happened, it's not something that Argonaut Khan would do, looking at them. Finn. So what do you suggest, Tiona? Looking at her. Tiona. Me. Surprised. Hein. You seem to understand the boy's situation the most, what do you suggest we do? Tiona. Well, I also think it would be great if Argonaut Khan joined our family, but if we suggest that we would have to give something to his family that could help them so that he accepts. Finn. Something in return, thoughtful, you suggest giving them a member of our family in exchange, looking at them. Tiona. It could be, or it could also pay off part of his knife debt or give him some kind of military or political support, looking at them. Finn. It's not a bad idea to convince him without him resisting, but we wouldn't be able to access big things either, you could pay only part of his debt or help them with a tight budget, looking at her, and there wouldn't be many of our members to fill the gap that bellcranel would leave, not to mention that not many would want to change families, thoughtful. Tiona. We could also let Aiz join the Hestia familia, looking away. Tiona said that in a low voice. But still everyone could hear her perfectly and turned to look at her with their eyes open, including Aiz. Hein. Live in the fireplace mansion. Looking at her. Tiona. Yes, I've seen the place from afar, it's quite nice and has a very large patio and a fairly large and cozy structure, there aren't that many people, but that might be good for a baby, since there aren't so many adventurers it would create a more moderate environment and not be so related to the dungeon, also babies cry a lot, especially at night, our family members wouldn't be so happy to hear a baby cry, looking at them. Riveria. Thoughtful. Finn. We can soundproof your room, looking at her. Tiona. They won't always be in their room and they'll require a lot of care and expeditions could also be a problem. The adventurers in our family always come back excited and drink too much. There are often fights within our headquarters and that wouldn't be the best environment to raise a baby, looking at him. Finn. Makes sense, but we can't just let Aiz move to another family, seriously. Tiona. Neither does Belle, staring at him. Finn. Looking at her, very well, sighing, you've proven your point, neither Belle's family nor Belle would give up their current position so easily, but something has to be done to keep the parents together, looking at her. Tiona. Crossing her arms. The atmosphere had become tense. Both of them thought in the opposite way and had different opinions that they were going to defend at all costs, that was easy to notice. The others watched Tiona and Finn's argument in silence, waiting to see what else would happen. Aiz was in her own world thinking deeply about everything she had just heard. Would one of them have to leave their family? Before anyone else could say anything, a certain dwarf man with a big beard who had been silent all this time stood up from the sofa, drawing the attention of everyone who turned to look at him. Gareth. Very well, I think we're done with our meeting for today. It would be better to continue discussing this more calmly another day. For now, why don't we finish the meeting and you continue planning what to do to present your ideas next time? Looking at both of them. Finn nodded calmly and then turned to see Tiona, who just snorted with her arms crossed without looking at anyone. Gareth took that as a yes. Gareth. Very well, let's pick this up in a few days, leaving. Finn sighed lightly and also stood up, leaving the room calmly. Tiona waited a few seconds while receiving the deep look of her sister on her right before getting up with a smile, as if nothing had happened and approaching Aiz. Tiona and Aiz, and have you already thought about what the baby's name will be? Smiling happily. Aiz looked at her slightly surprised for a few seconds before returning to her usual look and shaking her head. Riveria. We thought it was still too early to decide that, getting closer. Tiona. Oh come on, it's never too early to think of names, smiling, there are many beautiful names for boys and girls, we have to talk about a few, maybe you like one, smiling. Tian. Hey. You can't help Aiz on your own with that. That would make you the godmother. Pointing at her. Tiona was silent for a few seconds before turning slightly with a victorious smile on her face. Let's see. Tian. Damn it. That was Tiona's plan since she started suggesting names. And. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.